but I hadn't.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Tempe City Council Work Study Session for December 13th. Joel, is that you?
Yeah, we were not happy about it.
You get those
All right.
tacks out of your toenails.
Again, this is the work study session for December 13th, 2018. The first item on our agenda is our call to the audience for the issue review session and committee of the whole items. Audience members have up to 3 minutes to address the city council. If you would like to speak on a certain item, please fill out a speaker's card and please hand it to our deputy city clerk or our acting deputy city clerk, I guess, Tim, in the back of the room, and give it to us so we can call your name when it's your time to address the council. So I do have some cards, and the first one is Cheryl Foster. If you could come down and state your name and place of residence for the record.
Cheryl Foster, Tempe, resident of Tempe. So good evening, Mayor Mitchell and honorable members of the Tempe City Council. My name is Cheryl Foster, and I serve as chair of the East Maricopa Regional Partnership Council of First Things First, and that includes the city of Tempe. Additionally, I'm a 50-year resident of Tempe. So the East Maricopa region is comprised of the communities of Ahwatukee, Chandler, Guadalupe, Tempe, Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, Cave Creek, Carefree, Fountain Hills, Goldfield Ranch, Fountain Hills, and the Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation. The Regional Council invests in a variety of early childhood programs to enhance school readiness for young children in our community, including strengthening families in their role as their child's first teachers, providing developmental and sensory screenings to detect issues that, left unaddressed, could become learning challenges later on, and providing screenings and fluoride varnishes to detect and prevent dental problems, which are the leading cause of absence once children enter school. But our largest investment by far, almost $4 million last year, is improving the quality of and access to early learning. Last year, those investments improved the quality of childcare and preschool for more than 6,000 children, including almost 600 children from low-income families who access those quality early learning programs with one of our scholarships. Of course, there's never sufficient resources to meet all of the community needs, and that's where First Things First looks to public and private partners who can help leverage these investments to make an even greater impact in our community. So there is no better example of this than Tempe Pre. With this investment, you are not only improving school readiness for hundreds of children in your community, you are also serving as an example to other municipalities of how they can approach the educational needs of their young children in innovative and collaborative ways, because that's what Tempe Pre is, an amazing community collaboration that has brought together the city, its schools, First Things First, philanthropic partners like the Piper and Helios Foundations, and families and that have made us all partners in ensuring children arrive at kindergarten prepared to be successful. And I hope you notice that other cities are taking notice. And Tempe Pre is also helping to make the case for early childhood investments. The evaluation being conducted on the program is not only showing you that your investment works, it is contributing to the national body of research on evidence-based early learning strategies, and it is providing an Arizona-specific example of how focusing on their early years can yield short and long-term gains for children in their communities. First Things First has been very proud to partner with you in those efforts, and so we commend you for your willingness to explore options for keeping this wonderful program viable in your city. Our Regional Director, Conrad Lindo, and I are here tonight to provide any information that you may need to further those efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Rachel Yanov.
This is my first meeting.
Hi. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. Hi, friends. I am Rachel Yanoff, and I am the Executive Director of Achieve 60 Arizona. I am here because you actually have this amazing goal called Achieve 65 Tempe, so you're even bigger than the goal, and I want to just share and sort of applaud the innovation, the leadership, and the real ownership of not only the goal that Arizona has set, but really looking at it from your local community and how Tempe can really be the leader in this work. I've actually had the opportunity to talk with a few of you about this, and it's just, I think sometimes you all get to do the work and hear all the things that don't work, so I want to be here to show you and tell you how many communities are looking at the work you're doing and thinking of this entire pre-K through 20 spectrum and how a city truly engages in that effort. We have many cities who are asking us what's happening in Tempe. We write one-pagers on your behalf to try to tell the story of here's how a city engages with our earliest young people all the way through our adults. And so your leadership, your innovation, your creativity, your willingness to be the first, because somebody had to take that step with Tempe Pre and a lot of other really innovative programs like College Connect and Career Ready are showing other cities what's possible. So I'm geeked obviously about the later end of the attainment level, but I also just want to say, it's really fun to see the ripple effects. So Tempe Pre, actually, your city manager is reporting at the City League and Towns event that 40% of those parents went back to school. 40% of those parents are accessing our College Connect resources and other things, right? And that's pretty amazing to see that it's not just that first generation of 3 to 5 year olds, but it's that other level of parents re-engaging and changing that real dynamic of generational poverty. So on behalf of Achieve 60, a whole whopping team of 2 of us, we are super excited to partner with you. We want to help tell your story. We want to help you all connect all of those dots along the way of the work you are doing to share that story, get other communities who are excited and interested to buy in and launch their own initiatives like yours, but also to just remember to sort of help you applaud your own work and the process you're going through and the fact that you're being so thoughtful about such a really critical part and role that a city can play. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you for the time some of you have already given me. I'll be bugging the rest of you soon, but please feel free to think of Achieve 60 as your team in this work as well.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Next, Ann Gill.
Hi, good afternoon, Mayor Mitchell and honorable council members. I'm Ann Gill, the CEO of the Tempe Chamber of Commerce. And the Tempe Chamber has long been a supporter of education initiatives from Prop 301 and increased funding for teacher salaries to local bonds and overrides. The Tempe Chamber supports Arizona's P through 20 education systems. Business and education have a symbiotic relationship. Businesses provide the jobs and tax revenue needed to fund education, and our schools provide the workforce and business leaders of tomorrow. So for this reason, the Tempe Chamber appreciates the dialogue that you're going to have tonight surrounding the effects of subsidizing early childhood education. A little concern about the program costs. The $8,297 per participant price tag far exceeds the tuition of most private sector pre-K providers, so clearly something to think about as the program and you're looking at your long-term funding. The Tempe Chamber is wanting to be a stakeholder in this discussion. It is our hope that this important conversation takes place in a public manner. The 2017 proposal left some money on the table by excluding stakeholders, so hopefully we don't repeat that process going forward. It's a great opportunity for Tempe. For these and many other reasons, the Tempe Chamber asked to coordinate those public meetings and with community members and stakeholders. Let's talk about the long-term plan and let's not rush into it for expediency purposes. We believe in an educated workforce. Obviously, we partnered with the city on our Career Ready Tempe program, and actually we just received funding from the U.S. Chamber Foundation, 1 out of 5 chambers in the country for that program because it's seen as sustainable, easy to implement, and one that's scalable and look to be a model around the country. So I would love to be part of the conversations as we move this forward and see how we can work together to take care of our children here in Tempe.
Thank you. Next is Tracy Valenzuela. Help me out.
Valenzuela?
That's what I thought.
Oh, good.
Well, I assume that. I couldn't read your handwriting, so.
Good evening. My name is Tracy Valenzuela. I live in Chandler, Arizona. However, I spend most of my waking hours here in Tempe. I've been teaching in Tempe for 30 years at through school. I would like to speak to you about the benefits that I am seeing with our newly formed preschools at our schools. I'd like you to ponder a question first, though. What does it mean to be ready for kindergarten? Does it mean the magic age of 5? I think it's a bigger picture than that. I think it means something bigger. To me, it means not only being academically prepared, it also means bringing your social and emotional readiness to kindergarten. It means having self-help skills and positive behavioral skills in place so students can meet the high demands of a kindergarten curriculum. The students that I have worked with this year that have attended our preschools in our schools in Tempe have increased in the following areas. They have stronger physical coordination. They have a more developed fine and gross motor skills. They have a more positive social and emotional development. They have way better problem-solving skills. They have a better sense of empathy and are able to build relationships with their peers. Students have also shown increases in pre-literacy skills such as book knowledge and concepts of print. They have increased vocabulary. Their sentence structure is way more complex than some of the other students that I'm receiving that have not been in preschool. They have a higher phonological awareness and book knowledge. They have increased letter sounds and ability to apply those letters and sounds. They can read more sight words. They have higher writing skills. They also have higher skills of being able to comprehend a question or a writing sentence, be able to come up with a sentence and actually be able to physically write that sentence. They have higher number sense. They are able to understand what numbers mean and how to use those. With your support of these preschool programs, students will continue to be prepared and be successful in kindergarten. I ask you to invest in our most vulnerable students so that we can build a stronger foundation and create change for our Tempe community. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Next is Marissa Schneckloth, otherwise known as Miss S. That's what her students refer to you as. How are you?
Good, how are you? Sorry, I have my water. The germs are going around.
Oh, yeah.
Marissa Schneckloth, City of Residence is Gilbert, and I am the principal at Thu Elementary. So I'm speaking on behalf of Tempe Elementary School District. And first I want to start off by thanking you guys for your current and past support of not just the amazing and innovative Tempe pre-program, but we have a partnership that's innovative, I think, between our school district and the city like no other that I'm aware of. So with the Tempe pre-program, we've had the opportunity to witness the benefits daily at Thu and across the district. As a community, it is our moral imperative and our responsibility to provide equal educational opportunities for our youth in poverty in our community of Tempe. The data that will be reviewed later this evening or afternoon will illustrate the social, emotional, literacy, language benefits of early preschool intervention for all of our students for attending high-quality preschool. We now have evidence of the additional kinder readiness impact of other academic areas such as mathematics. The students who have attended the Tempe preschool programs are now scoring above the national average on the KEA, which is the Kindergarten Entry Assessment. Kindergartners in our highest poverty zip code, such as our Thu community, are now prepared to be successful starting right off in kindergarten. This is even the playing field for beginning educational success for our highest need students in Tempe. The full-day Tempe pre-program has also allowed parents and guardians to become or remain employed, which directly benefits the Tempe community and their family well-being. It's also given the opportunity for many families and parents to go back to school or continue their own education. The before and after school care gives the families an opportunity to possibly break that generational poverty, which is another long-term benefit to our Tempe community. I was going to introduce Tracy, I was thinking. So, I mean, she provided great examples as a teacher committed to 30 years to the highest need school in our community. And she firsthand is experiencing the benefits and the impact of that Tempe pre-program every day. To see the students come in ready and had the opportunity to attend a high quality preschool is amazing. So again, I invite you all anytime to come to THU to see the impact of the students and to witness it firsthand, just like we have the opportunity and the privilege to each and every day. So thank you. I hope you continue to support the Tempe pre-program. I know it's a financial impact, but the benefit long-term and the investment is priceless. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That is all the cards I have. Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to address us on these items listed on our work study and issue review? Could you please get my attention? Seeing none, I'll close that portion of the public meeting. Next is our issue review session items. Item 2A is autonomous vehicle study. Mr. K.
Mayor and Council.
I believe Mr. Miller's with you. You're going to introduce Dr. Miller?
Yes. Braden Kay, City of Tempe Sustainability Director, here with
Thad Miller, professor at the School for the Future of Innovation in Society at ASU.
We're here this evening to present a white paper that outlines recommendations for how Tempe can support use of autonomous vehicles in our city. We will discuss the role of AVs in Tempe. ASU will cover opportunities and risks that AVs present, and we will cover recommendations and next steps for you to consider. This report stems out of work that has been done by the Technology Innovation Steering Committee. We started a subcommittee that's been led by Rosa Inchausti and myself. We've had significant participation from fire, police, community services, community development, and a significant amount of time spent from Public Works Transportation. Sally Schuyler and her team have been really important to setting up this work for us. We've also had participants from the Maricopa Association of Governments, and we have Bob Hazlitt here this evening, who's been integral to this work, and significant involvement from the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, as well as other cities and regions that have helped inform this work. The report is meant to provide a policy trajectory of how mayor, council, and staff can move forward to guide AVs in our city. In working with AVs, we've learned that this emerging technology can either work for us or against us. AVs can be part of our efforts to reduce fatalities in our Vision Zero work. It can improve our 20-minute city efforts. It can reduce congestion, and it can be part of our carbon reduction efforts. However, if we're not intentional, AVs can do the opposite. It can be a part of causing further challenges with congestion, public safety, and carbon emissions. As we've done this work, we've been working very closely with the folks over at National League of Cities. They've created a very high quality policy preparation guide. So our planning, partnership, and policy efforts are directly aligned to the work that they've been doing at NLC and the best practices that they have identified. With that in mind, Thad will present the major findings of the white paper.
Thank you, Braden. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you, Council, and thank you, Mayor, for having us here today. And I also want to thank everybody in the Technology and Innovation Steering Committee and the Subcommittee on Autonomous Vehicles. It's really been an honor to work with everybody over the past year on this very closely, and just a great partnership between ASU and the City of Tempe, and one that we hope to be able to continue to work together on. And I think Braden hit it on the nose, and I just want to highlight the uniqueness of the City of Tempe's position when it comes to autonomous vehicles. The first slide that we have, the title slide, was actually taken from an advertisement from the launch of Waymo One last week, which is the first commercial rideshare autonomous vehicle service in the country that will be launched in Chandler and Tempe and other East Valley cities now. So Tempe's in a unique position in that we are one of the few cities in the country that actually has autonomous vehicles on the road. And so the spirit of the subcommittee and the spirit of this report is really with a sense of how can the city of Tempe be proactive to steer the development and deployment of autonomous vehicles along pathways that help the city meet their strategic goals and priorities. And so we did that through a number of meetings. We did that through talking with other cities that are thinking about this. We did interviews with City of Tempe staff and administration, as well as other experts in the field. We ran 3 forums on the future of transportation, part of which were autonomous vehicles. One was a public forum. One was a forum with the Transportation and Sustainability Commissions. And one was a forum with other experts in the region. And then, of course, we did research on industry and sort of policy developments and technical developments in autonomous vehicles. And so what you're seeing is the outcome of that work. And so through that work and through our discussions in the subcommittee, there are a number of opportunities and challenges, but I think there's really 3 core challenges that not only folks in the city, but across multiple cities throughout the U.S. really are grappling with. And one is that many proponents of autonomous vehicles tout the ability of autonomous vehicles to solve traffic and congestion issues through more efficiency and better communication, and that may be true, but it is not a standalone congestion fix. That it could be a potential useful tool in the toolkit, but you need other tools in the toolkit to solve that issue. And I'm going to jump to that third point first, that there are ways that AVs can support public transit, but there are ways that autonomous vehicles might actually threaten investments in public transit. And so if they operate as ride shares, like an Uber and Lyft, we're already seeing in cities across the country that ride shares are leading to decreasing ridership in public transit systems. And so to what extent might that further some of those trends? And by potentially threatening investments in transit, what are the equity and access implications of that in terms of investments in public transit, and how does that help or hurt folks who might rely on that? But then also, who will have access to this new technology? Will it go to all neighborhoods, only some neighborhoods? How is that decided? And will it be accessible to all populations, including elderly or disabled? And how will that work? And what opportunities are there as well? And so cities across the United States are grappling with these issues. Some of them are beginning to think about it and trying to be proactive around that. And a lot of cities are beginning to starting that process by really focusing on what matters and what goals and priorities they've already articulated. And so cities across the country, including the city of Tempe, are trying to manage some of the negative aspects of the car, right? There's goals around reducing emissions. There's goals around reducing congestion, around increasing walking and biking, around 20-minute neighborhoods, around increasing transit ridership. But part of the problem is that new technologies, whether it's electric vehicles or autonomous vehicles, look a whole lot like regular cars. And in some ways, maybe even more appealing, like I was mentioning around ride shares, or will there be so-called zombie trips where you have cars driving around empty, or will this increase the convenience and reduce the cost of car rides, and that it makes it more appealing. And so left to their own devices, you may actually see more cars on the road potentially, more with autonomous vehicles. But the opportunity here is how can you navigate these changes and harness autonomous vehicles and other emerging technologies in this mobility space in ways that still help Tempe meet their goals around 20-minute city, around public transit, around other issues that we've already mentioned. And there are a number of cities throughout the country that are already doing this. Some of them have just general policy initiatives. Others have pilot projects on the street that are collaborations between the city government and local industry. And we highlight a few in the report. I'll just quickly mention 2 here. One in Portland, Oregon, the Smart and Autonomous Vehicle Initiative, which has multiple staff throughout multiple bureaus developing work on autonomous vehicles and thinking about how that could help the city explicitly meet equity, sustainability, and carbon emission goals. And then working with regional governing bodies to reach out to communities to develop the first pilots that would hit the ground in Portland. In Boston, they've identified specific areas and partnered with a AV company called Nutonomy to really focus on, okay, how will this help them meet their goals around Vision Zero, traffic fatalities, and how will this help reduce congestion, and starting with specific areas and then expanding from there. But many of these cities, they might have little pilots on the ground, but they don't have multiple AV companies, operating at full speed and increasing those operations like the city of Tempe and our neighboring cities do. And so in the report, we take a good deal of time to go through how AVs might, for better or potentially for worse, impact the strategic goals and priorities that Tempe has set out for itself. And I'll just highlight a few here, but you'll notice we do a sort of thumbs up, thumbs down thing, because there is a high degree of uncertainty and ambiguity, right? There's nothing about the autonomous vehicle itself that leads to a better or worse outcome. It's really how we work with partners, work with industry to make it work for our communities and for our cities. And so, and how Tempe decides to do that. And so with our, I'm spacing on the, what a strategic goal is that? The priority area? Safe and secure communities. And so with traffic safety, for example, autonomous vehicles might drastically reduce human error, which is the cause of around 90% of automobile collisions. And so there's potentially massive safety gains to be gained there. But as we saw with a collision in March in the city, at the city of Tempe, that there is still uncertainty about the quality of the performance of various industry players. And so how to bring more transparency to that so that we know that traffic safety goals are going to be met. For strong community connections, I'll just briefly talk about data governance and sharing. A key element of the business model of AV industries and a lot of emerging technologies is data gathering, whether it's about behavior within the car or also importantly about the environment of the city as it moves around. And particularly in terms of the environment of the city, that's very useful data for the city of Tempe to know whether it's for public works or transportation planning or urban planning about how people are moving around. And so how can partnerships be created to share that, but also so the city of Tempe can share with AV industry so that they can operate safely and securely within the city. In terms of financial stability and vitality, I'll just highlight the labor market impact. There are ways in which bringing in new technology companies could add new jobs, especially high-skilled jobs, to the city. But there's also the potential of eliminating jobs when you don't need a driver anymore, or by reducing car sales and how that might affect car dealerships at the city of Tempe and associated businesses. And so there's uncertainty around that. In terms of quality of life, there are potential issues around public perception of what are hopes and concerns and potential uses of this technology from the community, how they feel about vehicle being tested around their school, for example, or how might they want to use it that maybe folks haven't thought of yet. And so there's a lot to be gained from community engagement. And finally, in terms of sustainable development, I mentioned briefly before emissions, but there could be ways in which this adds to vehicle miles traveled, which potentially increases local air emissions and potentially air pollution and potentially carbon emissions as well. And so, as you can see, there's a lot of uncertainty across these things that Tempe cares about. But I think also the message here from the committee is that there's also a lot of opportunity. And so how can we navigate that? How can the city of Tempe navigate that and find ways to generate common sense approaches that steer autonomous vehicles towards the values and goals and needs that Tempe cares about? And so in the report, we list kind of 3 core recommendations. The first is to continue to develop and build partnerships, which has already been started through this process, but can be expanded to industry, whether it's players that are already in the local area, like Waymo, Local Motors, and Lyft. There's a lot of opportunity to work with local industry to say, okay, if you want to operate here, how can you also help us solve our congestion issues, or how might it look like to work together on Vision Zero, or how can you work with public safety to help us identify opportunities there. The other area is for regional partnerships. As Braden mentioned, MAG has been at the table at these meetings, and there's a lot of opportunity there. The Greater Phoenix Economic Council has been working with Arizona State University to launch a Smart Regions Consortium, which is broader than autonomous vehicles, but would basically try to create learning opportunities as new technologies are deployed across the region. How can we learn from what Mesa is doing? How can Chandler learn from what Tempe is doing, et cetera? And so that we all don't have to reinvent the wheel. And also Valley Metro is thinking actively, and I'll mention that in a second, working with Waymo. And finally, at the state level, Governor Ducey has recently launched the Institute for Automated Mobility, which is going to be both a research and policy center around automated mobility. And there's opportunities there to get engaged with industry and get engaged with state level government, as well as the 3 state universities involved in that, to make sure that state level developments speak to local needs and concerns. In the report, we also recommend that the city of Tempe develop a smart mobility playbook. And so the key here is to continue the process that we've already done, but I think quickly realize, as we've said already, that there's a lot of uncertainty here. And all of these issues would generate from further articulation and further discussion, including really thinking about how the values that are important to Tempe what would it look like to use AVs to meet those? And we've started doing some of that thinking, but to really provide a platform to provide clarity on how Tempe wants to utilize autonomous vehicles and send that message to both the community across the city and to industry to generate those partnerships that can move this forward and continue to put Tempe at the forefront of innovation on this. And so just some examples of what that might look like, further discussion around equity and access and trying to figure out what pilot projects would look like around that. What further discussions need to happen around public safety so that fire and police know how to respond if and when issues emerge. What changes might be needed around infrastructure, zoning, and land use, and what opportunities are there. What protocols might be able to be set in place around data governance and sharing, and so that both industry and the city of Tempe can learn from each other. And finally, whether it's issues like Waymo 1 or pilot projects that the city of Tempe may itself launch, how can we make sure we're learning from the outcomes of those opportunities? And finally, the committee recommended that the city of Tempe consider and launch pilot projects. And so there are a few categories. One is, how can we make sure autonomous vehicles actually support public transportation? And so Valley Metro and Waymo, for example, are in the final phases of developing a partnership that would help to solve that and getting people to public transit. Reducing single occupancy vehicles. Another number of cities are looking at incentivizing fleet autonomous vehicles that are electric and shared, or FAVs, which helps meet carbon goals, but also helps to reduce single occupancy vehicles. Equity and access, along with the city of Tempe and ASU, are in the final stages of potentially getting funding from Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Alphabet and Google, for the Schmidt Futures endeavor that would try to harness autonomous vehicles to deliver low-cost mobility to low and middle-income communities, so cutting out the need for spending on a second car and getting them to public transportation. And finally, around community engagement, what are the potential uses, what are the hopes and concerns of local citizens around autonomous vehicles, and how can that be incorporated into both pilot projects and future potential policy and partnerships?
So in terms of next steps, we will be working on a supplemental budget request in order to create this smart mobility playbook. This playbook's going to be really important as new companies come to us. We keep on being told that we need to have a clear way that we want to work with companies, and working further with ASU on a playbook like this would make that possible, which is especially important from a public safety perspective. There's also an opportunity to continue to support partnerships and pilot projects. As Thad mentioned, we're already applying for one possible pilot project to address equity issues. There's also an opportunity to work with other cities on an RFI, a request for information of all AVs, to understand what AV technology is currently out there and what AV technology we should expect in the next 5 years. Because of the work that Strategic Management and Diversity has done with Public Works Transportation, we also are very far along the way of being able to develop an RFQ, which would be a specific request for a first last mile transit solution, potentially with State Farm as a partner. So there's multiple opportunities to be proactive in the pilot project front. Another really important next step is going to be to continue to make progress and investments in our transportation system. One of the things that we've heard from many of our partners is AVs are not an excuse to stop investing in a 21st century multimodal transportation system. So looking at Prop 400 extension, looking at investments in Vision Zero, looking at investments in 20-minute city are critical to making AVs work in our city. We can't stop the great work that you all are already working on in this space. Next, we need to continue to advocate for smart mobility at the regional level. It's wonderful that Bob's here tonight. MAG and GPEC are going to be important partners, and there's we hope that there's a seat at the table for Tempe in the work that the governor is doing and some of the advisory committees that are going to be put up in front of that work. And then we will also continue to follow NLC's recommendations. They already have our playbook, and there's folks around the country that have received this today via email and are very excited about the leadership role that ASU and Tempe are taking with this work. And if you have any questions, just let us know.
Yeah, I just want to mention that I think the playbook really seems like a great way to facilitate those conversations with companies that may want to pilot here. Like, obviously we tried with Ollie, it wasn't successful, but it doesn't mean that there's not going to be other opportunities for us to work with other, autonomous vehicle type modes of transportation in the future, and I think that's important. And then I think it also helps with the priority of us looking at how we're going to help facilitate the conversations with a 20-minute city, the Vision Zero that we're looking at with the combination of autonomous vehicles, that this playbook can help us with those as well. And also help us make sure that we can bring up different questions that we may have with our own departments within the city, so that we have the open lines of communication. Like you just said, I think it's important. We can't just rely on autonomous vehicles. It's a combination of a truly multimodal system. And I want to thank Bob and Mag for being here, because I think having those partners and with GPEC, looking at the technology, we're known as obviously Arizona State's #1 innovative university. Tempe's, I'm going to brag a little bit. We're pretty innovative in what we're doing, as you see in some of the items on the agenda tonight. But I would tell you that this is something I think that we could really build upon. So I want to thank you for everything that you've done, and Thad for everything, Dr. Miller, everything you've done to work with us, because I think it's important that it sends a direction, it sends a sense of place that companies want to be here. We're innovative, we're open to new ideas. So I think that's really important. Councilman Keating, then Councilman Granville.
Thank you, Mayor. Looking at the PowerPoint slide, and I looked through this booklet here, and one thing that's really clear to me is that the School for the Future of Innovation and Society has a world-class marketing team. Though I hear your old web developer was kind of a jerk, but I'm very pleased with this and the recommendations that you're bringing forward. I think we're spot on, and the need to work with the School for the Future Innovation and Society and with the Center for Smart Cities and Regions to help Tempe reach some of the ambitious goals we've laid out. This is a future that's coming whether we like it or not, so it's going to be critical that we're prepared for the new reality that's just over the horizon. So I look forward to continuing to work together with the university and with your center to make sure that Tempe is the safest city around and the easiest to get around in, and that we're investing in multimodal and other forms of innovative transportation systems, just to make sure that as the city continues to grow, we're not experiencing doubling, tripling pain points around those issues. So I thank you for your work, and look forward to continuing the relationship.
Councilman Granville.
Thank you, Mayor. So absolutely, I think this is great. As it relates to the mobility playbook, there are two things, and I know this is a little bit in the future to talk about, but that has surprised me that it hasn't been talked about more. One of which is the sort of the history of technology tends to go this way, in my opinion. First you invent it, then someone gets hurt, and then you regulate it, whether it's elevators or airplanes or asbestos or whatever. Like, we're all excited, we invented it, and then it kills people, and then the government steps in. I don't know if we'll ever be able to fix that pattern, but if we could at least put some of step 3 between step 1 and step 2, I think that would be helpful. Excuse me, and let me give you an example. The autonomous vehicles are continually having, unlike a physical thing, their software is continually being updated to be better, more efficient, more dynamic, or less in some cases because it hinders certain abilities. I have not heard a discussion, one, about what that process is as it relates to that. So you could have a perfectly great autonomous fleet working, or working better than humans, and if the patch for an autonomous vehicle is like the patch I get for my laptop, it could go bad really, really quickly. But there currently isn't any governmental testing system before version 2.14 comes out of software. And that iterative software creation process lends itself to such a degree of fallibility and such risk not being regulated. So that would be one of the things that I would hope that there'd be some sort of clearinghouse for updates and a review system for that. You would never do that with an airplane, right? You'd never change the autopilots on an airplane, every time you come out with a new patch without testing it in the airplane. But yet we do that with cars right now. The other thing I would say is, having seen what happens with either Lyft or Uber or even our scooters, man, I cannot stop coughing. My concern would be that something be in this document about what we would historically call redlining. Because sometimes the very people who can't afford cars and might not be in places that support public transportation might be the very places that these cars don't want to go for financial reasons or whatever. You see that with internet access as well sometimes. And so the idea of having a concrete policy about redlining, I think, would be really helpful as well.
Great.
Lauren, then Jennifer.
Thanks so much for the presentation, and I'm particularly keen on the Smart Mobility Playbook, looking at infrastructure zoning and land use. I know that we've seen some real evolution in the way developers look at parking and just simply planning out parking lots or parking structures that are flat instead of on the incline so they can be redeveloped later. But we haven't seen adjustments in these sort of typical multifamily homes or townhouses with garages, followed by like a circular drive. It takes up so much space in a particular development that could be green space, park space, dog park space. In the future, if we see a reduction of individual car ownership, or at least the reduction of multiple car ownership in a given family. So I'm particularly keen to look at parking allotments and how that might change, and how developers and architects could be brought into this new world so they can design for the future. And if they're not going to at least design for 10 years from now, they at least have things such that they can be adapted readily. So thank you.
Councilmember Adams.
Great work to ASU and City of Tempe staff for this robust report. I was very impressed with it. And this is a great example of how we can work with ASU and City of Tempe for partnerships and coming up with valuable solutions. I really like the fact that you did 3 public outreach for us before you talked to us about this subject. The value of the public outreach is very important to me, and I would like you to continue down that path and include the chamber and neighborhoods in future public outreach. It's a great program. Thank you very much.
Robin?
Thank you, Mayor. I think a lot has already been said, and I'm not going to echo that. Just want to say thank you, Dr. Miller, for your work and your willingness to partner. I think it's going to be a really great thing, and I think all the partners that you mentioned. I think the one thing I just really, really want to emphasize, and I know, Braden, you mentioned it, is about not just the continued investment of our transportation system. I mean, we have a promise to our residents of how we intended to spend that money, and we have large investments in bus, light rail, and now streetcar. So for me, I feel like everything needs to really support or enhance what we're already doing for transportation, because I certainly don't want anybody to think that we're replacing it. But it's actually could be a great connector, first mile, last mile. I know you talked about Waymo. Obviously, I'm the rep, and we've been talking with Valley Metro and Waymo. I don't know if that's going to be the answers to everything. So I think that when we look at a deep dive locally, I think this could play a really, really key role in that. But for me, I can't emphasize enough how important it is that we continue to create synergy with what we already have here and what we're already committed to. And I don't think anybody's willing to make that change, or we haven't heard from our residents that public transportation isn't important. And that would bring me to another thing. I mean, Jennifer mentioned public input, and one thing that's very important, I think, to all of us. But we recently just did our transportation survey, so hopefully there's inclusion of that. I know Valley Metro just did their transportation survey also.
So maybe there's some pieces that you can utilize, as you work through the process. I think it'd be really good to be able to bring those together as you move forward, but I'm excited. I think it'll be great.
One of the things I think that we continue to do is with the playbook, I think it was crucial to look for those grants, whether it's coming from the federal level. It could be, I don't know, Bob, maybe MAG may have something coming down the pipe we don't know about, but I know you're laughing, but that's important. But part of the playbook, is there a funding ask? Is there a funding cost to that playbook, or is this something that's just generated internal?
Supplemental.
We'll make a supplemental request. We'll also continue to look for grant
I mean,
opportunities.
I'd highly recommend looking, and that's what I think we should get with Marge and our federal delegation and our lobbyists on both, because I know we could work with Shay from ASU, who I've partnered with on a streetcar in DC, as well as our own federal lobbyists to see what grant opportunities are out there for innovations such as this, especially for mobility. And I think that could really help us as well. So I think we should actively pursue that, actually. I'm going back in January, so I think we should figure that out. Okay.
Yeah, and once they see this, hopefully they see we're well on our way, and this will act as
as
good
Marge
base
here,
on that.
we got to make sure that that's part of our ask. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Thank you.
All right, next item is item 1B, or 2B, or not 2B, no, item 2B is the innovation funds, the Tempe Works program. Mr. Keating.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just give some background on this. The council approved $20,000 for the funding of adding one-touch reporting to the 311 app. And part of the deal that was brokered to get that approval was if the app couldn't be made, which was a concern we were hearing from staff at the time, that money would go to, is it Live, Play, Grow? Because they at the time were asking for $100,000 for a year pilot, and they only got funded for $57,000 for their pilot. But part of the Play, Learn, Live, Grow, part of that initial ask for $100,000, $50,000 of those dollars were going to go to purchasing a vehicle for the organization, and Fleet was able to find them a vehicle to use outside of that money. So the $57,000 that we ended up approving for them is enough to cover their pilot for the first year. So, that's a point I want to make in that regard as far as asking for the money to be made for the $20,000 not to go into Play, Learn, Live, Grow, because I'm not sure what addition that would do past their pilot. But, I'd much rather see this go towards the Tempe Works program, which this would effectively double our bandwidth for the next year as far as being able to fund participants at city jobs. So, and then one final point I want to make is, it should have been my first point, but you know how it is when you're hard up here, it's hard up here. The condition was if the app couldn't be done, then, because that was a concern, but the app very clearly can be done because now there's a private market solution for what we were trying to do. So, I would say that really this money is, in my opinion, still open to be reassigned somewhere else, and I hope my colleagues will agree with me. That's it.
Any questions? Yes, Randy, then Robin. Colby and Robin.
Yeah, so first off, I think having this go to Tempe Works, I think it's a great use of it. I think all of us have heard positive feedback, and it's I don't know, it's just really a clear bellwether thing that we're doing right. Like very rarely do you get 100% of people saying like, yes, but this is one of them. So it's money well spent in my mind. The only thing I do want to mention though is right now, so I ended up building, or a friend of mine built this app. It's now in all of North America. The problem is it doesn't work in Tempe. So it's not really that it's duplicative work. I was told pretty clearly that to basically disable it in Tempe. So it works everywhere else in North America, but not in Tempe. And so right now it doesn't work here. So that's one problem. The other problem is once in a while someone will download it and they'll manually type it in and make it work in Tempe. You can manually put stuff in. And I'm not sure I've ever gotten clear direction from staff that they will even accept those emails. I mean, they accept them, but I'm not sure that they treat them like every other email or use them. And so I agree that what the private industry created could be duplicative, but given that it's disabled in Tempe, and given that I'm not entirely sure it would even be accepted in Tempe if they were sent in, I'm not sure it is currently duplicative, I guess is what I'm saying.
Robin?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I would just say, I think that the Tempe Works program was really great, Randy. I mean, I was actually part of the working group with Joel and Randy, the original one. And it was a really innovative idea. We talk about innovation and what Tempe is doing, and I definitely think that's one of the things. So I think that the committee would love to have $20,000 to be able to expand the program. But I think for those of you that know me well enough to know how much I value our processes and why we have them in place and how important that they are. We were able to fund the Playmobil and a lot of other really great things through the Innovation Fund. And we had specific guidelines for people to apply to the Innovation Fund. There were some that didn't get funded at all, and the Playmobil was one that only got funded partially. And it is my understanding that if they did have the additional $20,000, they would be able to continue the program for another 6 months or more, you know, doing exactly what they intended to do, which is reach the at-risk kids in our community that aren't close to parks or to a recreation center. So for me, to me, this undermines the process of why we created the Innovation Fund, how we funded it, and the promise that we all made right here in regards to if there was any money left over, it would go to fund the Playmobil. So I'm sticking to my original promise. I think that is what we intended to do. I have no doubts that we want to and need to extend and expand the Tempe Works program. But for me, for this to jump other things, I have a problem with that. I mean, to me, it's just about the budget. So I would say if it came forward in another manner, I definitely probably would be more than happy to support it.
Randy, but let me say something, then you can respond. Did anybody reach out to Denise regarding the Play, Learn, Live, Grow mobile initiative, seeing what that additional money could bring?
I did.
But you did, but did you?
No, I did not.
Lauren, then Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councilmember Keating made a good point, though, that part of that was, you know, 57,000 van cost is not needed for the program, so the program becomes that much cheaper. And as far as the innovation process, it was very malleable. It wasn't some historic process that we've done over the course of the years. There were a lot of, and I almost regret bringing up the whole innovation fund idea, but there were some real barriers in the roadway. And to me, like this program that he's talking about is truly innovative. We funded some projects that weren't necessarily innovative, but the time and place and the process just kind of went together to fund those projects. This project is truly innovative. It truly does need the funds, and you know, I support it wholeheartedly. And I think that it's a pretty small amount of money, minimally $20,000. And the fact that there's a van that's been supplied for the other program, which is very worthy, offsets that need. So I really support you, and I'm glad you brought it up, Randy.
Mayor, can I just rebut that? Because it's not about the van. You have to have people to go
Right.
out and be able to do the exercises with the kids. So that's not something that is included in the van cost. So that's something
They don't
different.
need the
Jennifer?
$57,000
Then
for
Randy.
the van.
It's
We
my
can put it towards
understanding
the
the
other
van
things.
is old and on its last legs. So it wasn't like this was a great brand new van. I'm also concerned about the process, and I do really think they're both valuable programs. So it's I think I would like to see them both have funding, if we can somehow work that out. I don't want to withdraw.
Joel, did you have anything? Joel?
I don't think it's
Yeah, thanks.
He's
But no, I just, I do support, you know, what the proposal is with Randy, and I think it's very worthwhile. It also parlays into a variety of other things we're trying to do with helping out our parks and having an added resource. So obviously, I think it's very worthwhile, and I do support it.
Randy?
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I totally respect and understand Councilmember Arendato's Savage's opinion on this. You know, reason people can disagree. You know, in my mind, you know, they asked for $100,000. They got $57,000 plus a van. That kind of makes the program whole. Tempe Works is, it's good. It's great work what Play, Learn, Live, Grow is doing. Tempe Works is changing lives. I mean, it's bringing Tempeans off the streets, giving them a job, giving them self-sufficiency. And just so, I totally understand that there's different opinions there, and that's all well and good. Will just say that I met with a citizen yesterday and was talking about this program and about this discussion tonight. And they said, well, if you get that $20,000, I'll throw in another 10. And I forgot to mention that earlier. So if we do approve this, we'll get another 10 for Tempe Works, which, in my opinion, is a better expenditure of that money.
Okay. Is there a way that the council can look at what we can do to help the live, learn, and play? Because the only thing I see that we did make a decision and now we're changing our decision. Is there a way that this council would be willing to look at this during the budget process as we come forward? Because I think it's a worthwhile program, but we have a lot of asks right now that's going to be in the plate. And that's the only thing that with this one-offs that is a challenge for us, because we're not looking at the full plate of all the different asks that we have to make an informed decision. We're doing these one-offs because it's like, no one's denying the availability or how great the work program is, or denying how good an impact we're making with the Live, Play, Learn, Grow Innovation Fund thing either. But the challenge that we have is that we've all agreed to a process. And that's the only process that I'm a little concerned about is we start taking these one-offs, certain items, it kind of goes against everything that we've been talking about, especially when it comes to funding certain programs.
So I think Randy said it right, that reasonable minds can differ on this one. But I think your point, Mayor, is well taken, and that is that the reason for the Innovation Fund was to get various programs that didn't have a great place in our process to be a proof of concept, right? And in the Live, Work, Play, they needed $100 and something thousand to prove that concept. Because they got a van, they didn't need $100,000 to prove that concept. My expectation would be that they would come back to our budget process having proved that process and say, look, you gave us enough money to see if this was a good idea. We can bring you some data, we can bring you some information, and then we can say, okay, we think this is the kind of thing that deserves a long-term funding source, or the numbers weren't what we thought they would be, and it doesn't deserve a long-term funding source. And so in my mind, it coming back through our process is exactly what was always intended. I never expected that that the Innovation Fund was meant to be a long-term funding source for anything, including including the Tempe Works program, right? So I think it all sort of dovetails together pretty well to do it this way.
Is there a way to split it? Joel, do you have anything, Joel? Joel, did you have any other questions?
Thanks, Mayor. No, the only thing I was going to add, I'm sorry, I'm dealing with my foot. But the only thing I wanted to add was, to your point, Mayor, is there a way, either sooner than later, next meeting, we can get a list of all these kind of one asks and just have the council be aware of what we have out there and really kind of take a hard look at some of these, and then kind of narrow it down to if there is some things that are going to go forward that at least we know what we're going against.
Say that again? Can you repeat what you said?
Basically, to your point, Mayor, I don't know if you're hearing me, can we get an ask, or I'm sorry, can we get a list of the things that the council has proposed for this year or for the budget cycle that we're trying to draw money from, just to see what that list looks like, and then maybe make a more of a logical decision on if there are items we're going to support. At least we know what the whole list looks like.
Okay. Jennifer, then Robin.
I just wanted to suggest doing a split down the middle, and because like I said, they're both valuable programs, and I think that's a good compromise.
It's just I don't even know if Randy's willing to do that. Robin?
Just a couple of things. I mean, I know Deborah's here, and I'm sure she probably addressed some of your questions. But secondly, I think Colby brought up a good point about proving, I mean, they need to prove themselves as they come back. It's an innovation. The whole reason is to create something new and different, but you can't set somebody up for failure either. And I think when we give them an older van and something a little bit different that, isn't exactly what they expected, but they're making do, I mean, to me, I
Doesn't
think
mean
that,
the whole.
yeah, I just feel like, we didn't come through on our promise. And our promise, we made a decision, and I get it. We can change our mind. I guess that's the way things work. But I feel very committed to making sure that we keep them as whole as possible. And I think that the one thing too about the Tempe Works program is I don't even know what $20,000 is going to do in the sense, because the working group hasn't even come back together to really talk about it, because maybe it's 40,000, maybe it's 50. I don't know. I do know that program has been super successful, and I think it does deserve more revenue. I don't deny that one bit. I just don't know if that's exactly the way to do it. So I think it's really about the process. I think we made a commitment, and I feel like it's really important to stick to that. And I'm sure if you want some more information from Denise, she could probably give it to you, so it's not secondhand information.
Lauren?
It was my understanding when we had the Innovation Fund discussions that the money that we were allotting to that program was enough to get that program started and do a pilot.
Let's ask her.
Do a pilot. Okay, let's ask her. And there were other programs, if you recall, that did not get the full funding that they wanted, but they realized that happened with the floating islands. It happened with Equity in Action. It was enough to get started to do a proof of concept.
Judy?
And we should bring them, I mean, by rights, we bring everybody
Everybody
back
back,
and ask them.
But we did make a statement about that one particular one.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. We just wanted to point out that there is an update scheduled for you on all of the innovation projects on January 17th.
Can we bring Denise down?
Randy?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of clarify the way I recall the discussion going, and there was a lot of concern from staff that this was just impossible to do and was going to be a boondoggle, quite frankly. And, I think Councilmember Granville kind of proved those concerns not to be very valid when he created his own version of the app. So, that's why, I was conceding to staff's expertise on that, worrying about, creating this new system and say, okay, you know what, maybe you are right. I didn't think they were, but maybe you are right. So let's have another designation for this money to go to in case that turns out to be, the case. But what happened is it's not impossible, and there's just, in my mind, a better use for the money into the Tempe Works program. Now, we do have that pledge for $10,000 additional dollars. Oh, before I get to that, what $20,000 would do to the Tempe Works program would be to double its budget from last year. But we do have the $10,000, the pledge. So if we can all agree on just splitting it, then we'll give 10 to where it was promised, 10 to Tempe Works. That other 10's gonna come in, and that will be the 20 that we're looking at right now. That's a compromise that I would be happy to support if we can agree on that. I'm happy to hear from Denise too, but, I would like the full 20. I think that maybe the votes are there for it, but that's not the way I can do things, as you know. If we could, come up with a compromise, then, it's better than, having some ugly fight up here.
I'm good with compromise. Could we
Okay,
have
you
Denise
outside.
though? Can we have Denise come down? I just have some questions
Denise
for her.
is
I should be outside.
Denise
Yeah.
here? Councilmember, there's some questions that some of the council members would like to ask you.
Good evening. Good evening.
Mr. Burt.
Keith Burke, Community Services Director, and obviously with me is Denise Rinchler, our coordinator for recreation and outreach and creator of the Playmobil. So give her an update, let her give you an update, but she's been working hard, getting things ready for this next year. Obviously, we did receive a van from Fleet that was scheduled to be turned in and demolished, but we've been resurrecting it over the last 6 months. Been resurrecting over the last 6 months. She's been working with staff to coordinate the program, and I'll let her give you an update.
Started with a screwdriver, do you?
Pretty much.
Not quite that
How
bad.
old is the van?
It's a 2002.
And the life expectancy is 7 years for our vehicles with the city of Tempe, just so people know.
Oh.
Go ahead.
So, Mayor, council members, thank you very much for having me come up here. I'll be very brief. I wasn't prepared, but I do want to let you know that our initial ask was the $180,000 for 3 years, and then we put in the revised budget for $100,000 for a one-year pilot program. We were very fortunate to work with Fleet to be able to get the van that we just spoke about. Since then, we have been going back and working the numbers so that we can figure out how to get into the community and make this impact that we know that we're going to be able to make with our latchkey children. We currently have the program ready to roll out mid-January, and we're going to be going to 4 different parks every week for 4 weeks during the month. $20,000 to the Playmobil program would be funding for 2 staff members for an entire year, so school year, for an entire school year. I want to make sure that you all know that that's not the summer, but just the school year. So that's what the $20,000 would be for the Playmobil, and I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Lauren?
But are you able to launch the program, though, with $100,000 and to pilot it?
We are. We currently are able to launch the program and complete the school year and the 2019-20 school year. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the money that we were given, the $57,500, contingent on nothing going wrong with the van.
Good caveat.
Okay, so you're saying that, and just make sure I'm understanding correctly, so the $57,500 that we allocated was enough to get the pilot, with the addition of the van, of course, to get the pilot through the first year, and then another $20,000 will extend it a second year? Or will you need additional funding? Will that just cover the staff, but you need XYZ funding for the program in addition to that?
No, Mayor and Council, Councilmember Keating, that $20,000 would be for the staff. We have the resources that we're going to be taking out in the van. We've acquired the equipment. We have that, and we have a little budget for replacement equipment, a very small budget, but for replacement equipment. So that $20,000 would go towards staff.
So would the program then continue without additional funds for the council for an additional year? If it costs $57,000 the first year, the second year is $20,000?
Yes, yes, Councilmember Keating, that $20,000 would be for that second year, and we have been submitting grant requests, and we're going to continue to do so. Our goal is to make this program sustainable. We just need to get out into the community to be able to have the results to show the impact, so that we can, acquire these grants.
But no, then, so without additional funding besides the $20,000, it doesn't go into a second year, right?
No, it would not go into a second year. That's correct.
Okay, so you need additional funding beyond the $20,000 to continue it.
Unless it was submitted as part of the budget process.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's kind of what I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to get at. Is this $20,000 is not going to take it through year 2? They're still going to come back and need more money, which I'm happy to consider, but it's not going to be all right. Now it goes for another year. Then we look at it. Then now in 2 years, it's going to be we're dealing with this in March, regardless of whether we give the $20,000 to this program.
Yeah. Randy, I think you kind of brought up a good point in regards to, and I think Colby might have said it too, is the programs have to prove themselves, right? Tempe Works is not an exception to that. It needs to prove itself through the budget process also. So I don't know why we would think that one would supersede anything else. And that's why I feel it's just really important to go back to what our original promise was and what our intent was, and how they allocate those monies, to me, is up to them, what best makes use for that program. And I will tell you, having a vehicle probably that old, the thought that nothing's going to happen to it, I wouldn't even think that. I mean, so part of me says they're already kind of limping on a couple of legs anyway, so anything that we can do to help energize them to be successful, that's to me where I think we've already made our promise. But I'm not saying that Tempe Works is not deserving of money in the future, and I'm sure it will be able to approve itself when we get to that point and can.
Jennifer?
What does the research show as far as the latchkey kids and how this helps them? Can you just give us some general?
Mayor and Council, when we put together our proposal, we showed that there was 20%. That's the national statistic. In working with KidZone, we're showing that that's also Arizona's average is 20%.
20%.
Of the children go home unattended, so they're unsupervised after school between 3 and 6. That's also the time, Monday through Thursday, between 3 and 6 p.m. is when children are most likely to get into trouble, either commit a crime, become a victim of a crime, or experiment with risky behavior.
Thank you.
And I can forward that whole presentation to you. I just didn't bring it, sorry.
Councilman Keating?
So, in my mind, we're looking at. I would respectfully disagree with Councilmember Redondo Savage. I understand the need to go through the budget process, and we're part of that working group, and I look forward to working with you and Councilmember Navarro to kind of expand that, but I do think Tempe Works has proven itself through the life of its pilot, and any additional resources we can give to it would be beneficial. Now, you know, this program is still in its pilot, and even if we give them the $20,000, that's still not enough to continue the pilot. So I'm just not sure, as far as, you know, the bang for the buck that we're getting, we're still going to allocate more money to the program, which I absolutely support, but we're talking about a percentage of additional monies, you know, to what is currently a pilot against doubling the budget for what is already a successful program.
The pilot would continue on as long as the van still works. So the 20,000 would pay for staffing to take it through a second year of the 3-year ask that Denise originally brought forward in her presentation.
So
it will cover a second year.
Correct. As long as there's no major repairs with the vehicle and the van that we would have to do, we would be able to continue on through the second year of our pilot.
Rally the troops.
I like the original proposal of splitting it 50-50 because of the van most likely is not going to last, statistically speaking.
Okay.
I'd say, well, sorry. Mr.
Go ahead.
But considering that that's the 20,000 is really for the third year, and I just think we deal with that in the budget.
He said the second year.
The second year. Pilot is meant to be a pilot. We don't even have anything as results of the pilot. You're establishing it all. It's starting in January. And it just seems like the need is now for this other program, and I think we should fund it at 20,000. Also, as I recall, I mean, this maybe isn't appropriate to say, but I think you had one request out of that innovation fund process. Was that right? And you left it just for that one thing. And I think, and just for collegiality, and the way this wasn't a strict time-ordered traditional process when we had the innovation fund. And I want to respect the Councilmember Keating's approach to this and trying to responsibly use that money and not throw it away as he saw it may be happening. He said, let's apply it to something that's innovative that really does need the money, needs it now. So I would like to continue with the 20,000.
I want to say, I think every program that we offer, that our staff offers up, we're never going to have enough resources to cover all the programs that we have. To say that these programs aren't going to be successful is an understatement, because usually when we do certain types of programs, we've seen it with the committee that Councilmember Keating's talking about, and what Denise and Keith are up here talking about, to all the other innovation funds. I mean, they're all successful. It's just a matter of, the ultimate question is, how much money do we really have? So we're always going to be continuing to look for additional dollars. In fact, we're doing that tonight on a couple of agenda items that are further down on our agenda. And it started out as a pilot program, and we're looking at how we can sustain it and what works. So to say that there's not going to be an opportunity to get additional funds through the budget process, we're going to have limited funds. We're going to have some tough questions that we're going to have to answer as a council, but it doesn't preclude us from trying to spread what we can out to programs that are going to be working and successful work. I think Councilman Keating had a good idea to see if we could split the proceeds of the 20,000, because there is something of a process that we do have, understanding the importance of the works program and understanding the importance of the grow, live, play, and learn. And that just gives us more fuel, I think, as a council to go back out to find additional funds, especially from grant dollars, and turn every stone that we can, because all the programs that the city offers are really good. I don't know if there's any program that's not going to be worthwhile. We just have, we don't have all the necessary resources. And that's a challenge that we're going to face as a community. So what we can do to leverage those dollars to the best of our ability, that's our role and our goal, to see what we could get the best return. And I think if there's a compromise that's offered up, I think it's and then I think it's up to us to go out and get additional funds. And Councilman Keating already has talked to a private individual to help supplement that, and he could get the additional 20 that would double expand it, even though it's not, instead of getting 30, you get 20. But then he also offered up the opportunity to do the 10 for the live, play, grow, and learn, which we know there's a need there, and it's evident. So if there's an opportunity that we could split that and work with everybody, I think we should try to look at that as a community. Councilmember Keating, or Granville.
I'm fine with splitting it. I mean, from a collegiality standpoint, it seems like a fair way to go. The question I have for Denise, though, is $20,000 gets you through a year, a second year, but does $10,000 get you anything? Because it gets you one, and that's my question is Because sometimes you need all of the money to do anything, and sometimes you can do half as much with half the money. And I'm not sure which this is in this case.
I think we'll find the other 10.
Mayor and council, that's a great question, but the $10,000 would actually be able to get a whole nother semester with our 2 staff members, and that gives us more time in the park to get more results to continue to write those grants.
Okay, I just
And
didn't want to give
that's
you
what we
$10,000 if there was no process for you to
Thank you.
use.
Councilman Key.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, in the interest of collegiality and all that, you know, if Councilmember Arredondo Savage, if she will accept the compromise, I'm happy to accept that as well.
No pressure. It's because he doesn't want to go outside.
That's
Talk
right.
about it.
You're
Yes.
military, you're going to lose
Yes.
that fight.
Yes, I think that's a fair deal. I
Yes.
think
All right.
6 more
Thanks,
months will
Randy.
be really great.
Yeah, the additional 10,000, if it gets us through another semester, it'll be timing where we can then submit a supplemental and maybe get through that year, that timing, and then get through the budget process.
Right.
I would be very favorable to seeing that supplement.
There we go.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Is
you.
that clear? Okay, thank you.
Just as sort of
Thank you, Councilman Key.
from a fiscal budget note on all of this, one of the things to remember is, you know, in funding Tempe Works, it was a commitment by Public Works to find money in their existing budget. There never was a supplemental submitted for the ongoing funding of Tempe Works. Whether or not it's 10,000 today or 20,000 today, there still has to be a point at which council gives direction in the budget process, presumably, that there is a collective will to fund and on an ongoing basis Tempe Works, and at some amount. So you're still going to have to answer that question at some point. Because all it means is right now, Public Works is funding it out of existing funds. And that's not in itself a line item. So I would suggest that that conversation, based on what I've heard today, should probably is something that should come in the next budget process that would adhere to our process.
Yeah, I just want to thank the city manager for pointing that out, and that is definitely something we're going to look at when we want to expand the program, not only existing opportunities within the budget, but possibilities for new funding and kind of a larger program. So that's something that we will be bringing back to you. We are kind of, we'll be doing it quickly because we know the budget process starts here in a couple months. So I believe we have a meeting for later on this month, and we're going to work on that. We're going to bring back what not only is sustaining model for the program, but a way to expand it further and increase the bandwidth so we have more individuals at any given time in the program.
Yeah, just to go to your point, Andrew, I agree with you. One of my frustrations that I've continually had with the budget process is you'll end up talking to city staff or whoever, and you'll be like, whatever happened to that thing? And they're like, oh, it got cut. And I'm like, I didn't cut it. And they're like, no, it got cut before you saw it. And it's because it gets cut sort of working its way up the system. And that's been a long period of frustration for me because there are many things that we've set goals about, and this being one of them, that I'm afraid that if their committee didn't come back with direction, I wouldn't even get the chance to say yes in our budget process because it would have gotten cut way before we got the final version of the budget. And so the thing my feedback is just be aware of that so that we have the opportunity to say yes to things we previously said yes to.
I hear that, and this is slightly different. I just want to make sure that you understand there was no, I'm not suggesting that that Public Works was looking to cut Tempe Works. What I'm saying is the funding of it, well, I think it is related because the issue has to do with the funding of Tempe Works and the 20,000. I wanted to clarify for the record that this is one-time money. Right. It came out of a limited, finite budget of the innovation funding. And the process by which Tempe Works was originally started was finding money in an existing budget and not creating a separate line item. So that was what Councilmember Key was talking about. What you're talking about, I can address, and I certainly will.
You can address it later, so we're not getting.
And I hope that strategic management and that process will make what you just described a lot less frequent. I think it's already on the wane.
I want to make a suggestion. It's Public Works. First of all, I'm very supportive of this program, Randy. I think it's a great program, and also I know that Public Works has a lot of vacancies right now, and so those salaries are not being paid out. So that perhaps is a place that we could get more funding for your program.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Sure.
All right. Next item is our public benefit list for development agreements. Donna and Rosa.
I'm like 2 years in making.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. One of the things that we talked about regarding public benefits. Let me find my notes here. At our retreat that we had about 3 months ago in September, we had a discussion about development agreements and the types of public benefits that the city would be seeking in return of certain projects when developers come to the city. I want to provide, hopefully we can get a little more guidance from the council on providing a list up front for the types of benefits that we're looking for. This will really help us ensure that a developer will have an opportunity to look and review, determine the items that we care about as a council that fits within the synergy of a project. For example, if an item in a multifamily or a housing project was coming forward, obviously if there was a request for some assistance, the city would be, okay, what can you do to help us as a public benefit with affordable housing, for example, or something of that nature. I think that we need to make sure that the items that we would be looking for really would have a public benefit portion of it, as outlined that we've mentioned before, and it really ties with the council priorities that we have for the council. I think it's important that we have that list because we all talked about it for better transparency for the developers when they do come for us. You know, I'm thinking bigger picture. Not, I mean, what's listed in our packets is a big swath, a big brush. What I'm thinking more is including a bigger picture, development-related items that are really applicable to. We always talk about affordable housing units. We talk about donation to school foundations. Whether we did it to the school district, you know, we always say in lieu of this, we provide this money for our school districts. We talk about infrastructure, you know, and transportation. We talked about apprenticeship programs or highly skilled labor. We talked about stuff like that that fits some of the goals that we have. I think that's important that we narrow that down and we have that discussion because I think the list that we have, it needs to be related to our specific goals and what our achievements are. But I'm thinking big picture. I'm not talking about everything under the sun because I don't think that's realistic. I think when the developer is looking for build apartments, as I mentioned, what can we, you know, if they're asking for something or some assistance, that's when we can ask for certain things that are applicable to that area. It could be transportation. If they're on a light rail, what would you be asking for? Would you give light rail passes, for example, to help people utilize a light rail, for example? Stuff like that, that's what we're thinking of. And we have some lists that we've talked about at the retreat, and I just want to hone those down, if we can have that, so we can come back at a future discussion how we move those forward, if that's okay with everybody.
We have the list in our packet.
But that's not that's not it. It's too much. We don't have. I mean, we're talking about specific lists that we're talking about. You know, we talked about transportation. We talked about affordable housing. We're talking about certain. We need to narrow that list down because it can't be every. They're not going to be able to do everything, and because it has to be in relation to the proportional benefit of the public benefit. Because some of those may not be related at all, so we might not be able to do any of this. Robin.
Well, you know, it was kind of funny because I saw this list. I'm like, I don't remember our list being that big, right?
That's the point.
And then I went back and I looked, and there was a lot of things in parentheses. So then I see you just kind of laid them all out. So I get that. I went through it, and I was thinking in my brain, kind of like the mayor was, in regards to, okay, what are our priorities? What are we hearing from our citizens? What are we hearing from our employees? You know, what is it that we need to be really working on? So I agree with the mayor. I think we can narrow this down a little bit, but at the same time, I think as we think about narrowing it down, if that's what we want to do, is more specifics, because like I can see right away of many of these things definitely are, I can see the public benefit, not a problem at all. And there's others that I kind of question. I'm just not really sure I can see the direct connection. So I think if there's even more of an example maybe, or what that might look like. I mean, because I was kind of trying to go through to, and of course, like Achieve 65. One of the things that we've all been talking about and how important it is. Pavement quality, that's one of the things that our residents been talking about forever. Anytime that we can feel safer in our communities. And it was so funny. And no, Lauren, I'm not trying. I actually read the transportation survey, so I don't know if any of you actually read it. But there was one thing that I was super surprised how tree canopy and having shade for people walking wasn't a top. That blew my mind away, because I thought, to me, well, of course that's a priority, but it wasn't in the survey, right? So I think if we can, I'm not saying take it out, I'm just saying things like that, if we can utilize our surveys, any feedback that we had to kind of like either create some examples of what these might look like, or maybe eliminate some so others would elevate, because I feel like this is a really big, huge list. And I'm not saying that it's bad, but I think it's
We gotta be
a little
realistic.
bit too much, and I don't know how we're gonna make changes in those things that we really wanna make changes in if we're not pointing to them a little bit more
It needs
focused.
to, it needs to really, it needs to balance what the priorities are that we just did from our city survey. The number one was our neighborhoods, obviously social and human services, we've talked about that. That's where affordable housing will come in. And then the other priorities that we've had from the survey, the economic and business development, and then the condition of our roads. So whatever, if you look at our survey, that needs to be part of this discussion.
Yep.
And if we can narrow this down, because some of this, if you look at it, disability, I mean, like ADA transition plan, we're doing that. Some of the stuff we were already doing, that's what I mean by some of the stuff could be taken off. And I think the real focus was, we're looking at, what can we do with transportation, traffic mitigation? Because before we've asked for roundabouts, or we've asked for certain traffic calming measures. Like what we did with the guard gates for the local. That was part of the public benefit. Or if we look at, what we can do for the school foundations that we've done with certain projects that we have, et cetera. That's the kind of stuff, or for, apprenticeship programs, something of that nature too, to help with the Chief 65. That's the kind of stuff that we're looking at. Councilman Granville.
So, I think I viewed this list a little bit differently. I viewed the list initially as when Donna goes to talk to somebody, she can say, look, here are the kind of things you're likely to hear when you go talk to council members. Here are the kind of things that they're likely to talk to you about. We know that every time you go talk to Lauren, she's going to talk about this. We know every time you go talk to Robin, she's going to talk to you about this. So if any of these interest you, better to start thinking about them on the front end. But it's a long list. So I would assume maybe somebody only picked one or two of these that they were half going to do anyway, or it's just an inherent interest of the developer that they really like trees or something like that. But I also understand your point that it's a long list. And so maybe the way to pare this list down is to do like what we did with our budget process, where we have these things and maybe we each get 5 points or 7 points. We all cast our votes and we have sort of a set of major asks and minor asks, so that the things that got 4 or 5 or 6 points among council members, Donna can say, look, and maybe we even let the survey also be a voter, right? Even maybe a super majority voter, and put that together so that she can say, look, council's told us here are 35 things that are important to them, but when we really surveyed and talked to them and looked at our survey, these were the 5 that were like, they're like really important asks. And these are the other 25 that are, they also have a strong vested interest in. Because the reason we got to this in the first place is because developers were skipping from person to person and they were getting divergent voices in those conversations, right? You'd ask for one thing, Randy'd ask for another thing, I'd ask for another thing, and they were using our lack of unified voice to peel us off to get to 4 votes. By handing them a sheet with everything on it, they can't peel us off to get to 4 votes. And so if it's a major and a minor ask, that's okay, because it still solves that problem of them peeling us off with who they can make happy.
What I'm looking at is a larger community, we should be looking at the larger community needs. And example, the affordable housing, education, sustainability, traffic, transportation, making sure that we've talked about apprenticeships, and we talked about to help with the Chief 65. Those are the kinds of things, that's the larger community needs that fit within all the other stuff you're talking about, we're already doing.
But
so that's why I think that we
sort of
could
step out in the voting. Because maybe those
that's
things
the
that
only
you
thing I was
excluded
talking
are the
about.
things most important.
Jennifer?
Yes, the citizen survey, the neighborhoods have spoken about what their top priorities are, and we need to be respectful of what they've chosen
Agreed.
for their answers. Thank you.
Lauren?
I agree with you, Councilmember Granville. Not necessarily that we have a vote or points, because I think that could get really clumsy, but there are some things that the developers are naturally bringing because they're getting the market demand, and one of those is, say, to have pullouts for or pull-ins for designated rideshare pickup, and we don't even need to ask for that because the market's already demanding that. And we have landscaping plans. I mean, maybe we should be talking to thinking about increasing our landscaping requirements and making it affirm to our goal of a 25% canopy in landscaped areas or something. But I mean, there are some that are, I mean, a few of these, I don't think a lot, but there are a few of these that seem to me like we could immediately remove just because they're already part of the process, and they wouldn't like not have a way for Lyft or ride share to pick up at their apartment building.
If I could just respond to that, Mayor. I think the issue is so if you were to go through and say, look, pick 5 that you think they're already doing anyway or don't rise to the level of being on this list, I'm going to bet that your 5 wouldn't match the mayor's 5 and wouldn't match Robin's 5 and wouldn't match Randy's 5, wouldn't match my 5. And that's exactly why we made this list, is we kind of kitchen sinked it, because all of us have a different list. And if we want to make a major and minor list, that's okay. But realistically, the reason we've got a kitchen sink list is because we all have different opinions. And staff did a great job of trying to put all of those random things into one list. I think the citizen satisfaction survey is a great way to do it. If we wanted to defer to the citizen satisfaction survey entirely, then whatever's in that bottom right-hand quadrant moves up on our list, and everything that's in the top left-hand quadrant moves down. Or bottom, you know what I mean, whatever the quadrants are, that's fine too. But then what we've essentially done is abdicated the leadership role in our list to our citizen satisfaction survey. There are good arguments for doing that, but let's just be clear, that's what we'd be doing.
Robin?
So just a couple of things that I heard. I mean, I 100% agree with Lauren. I don't want to do a point system thing.
Okay.
I don't want to do that. I think we aren't very successful at that. But I do agree with the fact that I don't want us to be picked off by developers either. I don't like that. I think it's better for developers, better for us when we're all on the same page. So however we get to this list, you know, based on utilizing surveys, utilizing the citizen satisfaction survey, the transportation survey, I mean, and what we've experienced and the way our budget works, I mean, to me, I think that would be a really good way to narrow down. And then maybe some of those things that we are struggling in the strategic priorities, right? So if we have some strategic priorities that have really large gaps and they need some attention, to me, I could see that making the list. So I mean, I would entrust, and I don't know about you, Mayor, but I think that based on this, just this dialogue and this conversation and some of the feedback, that you would be able to even maybe shore up this list just a little bit and see if you can bring back. And Donna, you work with these developers all the time, so you probably know what, you know, they're interested in, what they're not interested in, and I think that feedback's really valuable too.
I honestly agree with everything that's been said. I don't want to do the point system though, that doesn't work.
Sure.
I agree with that.
I'm not sure doing it here would work either.
Yeah, I don't think we're not going to.
The point is if you look at the big picture of things, I mean, we all can agree on affordability of housing, because we've talked about, we all can agree about traffic and congestion and transportation, and we talked about, you know, sustainability. We talked about, so if we could agree with the big picture and having that list, like you're saying, at least that's a starting point, and then we can see where they are, because then the developers coming in know where we all are. This is the top priority for us. That's what I was looking at. Donna?
Yes, Mayor, council members, Donna Kennedy, Economic Development. Thank you for this discussion here, because behind the scenes, the staff, we have had the same discussions. Some of the things on the list are from the community survey, some are from the business, some are from the retreat, some are from our initial proposal that we have. So it is kind of the kitchen sink, if you will, on it all. I can tell you though, currently the clients that we speak to, due to the fact that we have the opportunity zones in place, we are getting a tremendous ask from different developers. And when we start informing them of the strategic plan and what Tempe has to offer, and ROSA's, you know, portal, that's the word, it's a portal to go ahead and align what the strategies are with the different departments. They are so impressed. They're jumping online, they're seeing what's going on, and they say they're going to be investing all their monies in our opportunity zones because we have a plan. So this discussion here only helps further what that plan and the priorities are. So I guess it's kudos to the mayor and council on this. Moving forward, we can take your advice and come back with even a different list. But just, you know, it's not hard. It's just that there's so many priorities, because there's 100 of them with the strategic 99. So trying to narrow it down and get them to the best, you know, it did take this to go through this process. So once we come back and have something for you to really.
This is a working doc. This is not one that we're throwing out. We still keeping what's on here, but from a project perspective, this is what we're looking at. I mean, we all can agree on affordability for housing, whether it's providing units, a certain percentage unit based on what the ask is, you know, or community land trust, or whatever we look at. We all talked about transportation. We all talk about infrastructure. We talk about sustainability. in all the other elements that we have, if we can all agree on the big ones, and I think as we go through the process, there's certain things, there will be certain things that we will probably be asking, you know, what else you can include, but then this is a starting point for us, that they know that, so that this is the overall starting point that we're looking at, if that makes sense. Rosa?
Thank you, Mayor. So just to clarify, so I know I'm clear as far as when we walk away. So you're asking us to look at the 5 areas that were identified in the community survey, this present survey, community survey, which is policing, safety, condition of streets and sidewalks, neighborhood. And neighborhood specifically, the questions on the community survey were regarding, quite frankly, pavement quality, because we have done a great job of our arterial streets and our collector streets. But what we're hearing is it's the neighborhood streets. And we've done that because of the 2008 recession. And we're still trying to catch up. And in just speaking to Isaac, who manages that program, he said, even if looking at the innovation hub of the Broadway corridor and the Smith area, that pavement quality is probably the lowest. It's about 40, and our target's 70. So if that kind of gives an idea that as far as this opportunity for us to respond to our community regarding those neighborhood streets. Also, the 4th one was economic development in the community survey, but specifically in revitalizing some areas that the neighbors feel need to have a closer look from economic development. And then lastly, social and human services. And then also I heard affordable housing, any performance measure or anything that's related to traffic, or 20-minute city.
Yeah, because if you have a project comes in as have a dense project, for example, obviously it's going to have an impact. You know, we've looked at traffic calming, we've looked at other opportunities. If you look at some of the history things that we've done, that's why I think that's part of it.
And sprinkling affordable housing within some of those developments. I mean, we've been talking about it, but we haven't really necessarily specifically asked for it.
Councilman Randall?
Sorry.
I think you've summarized the feedback you're going to get. The feedback you're going to get pretty well. I don't know how you work with that, candidly, because our survey is more broad.
Yes.
I'm not sure how you rank crime-free multifamily housing designation in as it relates to our community survey, or how you rank, ADA transition plan or Geeks Night Out. I mean, so you're slotting these very narrow asks that we all tend to make into a very broad plan. So I don't know how you're going to do it, but I'm not sure you're going to get clear direction today.
Lauren?
And I assume we'll be coming back with some more descriptions. I mean, not lengthy descriptions, but I look at equal pay, and what you really mean is equal pay business partner. Will you be an equal pay business partner with us, right?
Exactly.
And so you'll be further delineating those categories, I assume?
If the
Where's
council,
that in our survey is the problem.
if the council would like, I think that's the question tonight. That's why I was revisiting the items on the community survey. The business survey was traffic and street maintenance, and just making clear that we are narrowing the scope.
That's the minutia of it, and I'm not saying it's not important. I think the bigger picture is that we've all talked about, and I've listened, we've talked about the big ones. That's the big ask that we're looking at. All the other stuff falls under, human services falls under affordable housing. It falls under a bunch of other stuff. I mean, I don't want to, if we can look at the broader picture of what we've always been looking at, that's what I think we're trying to get, to have you get some direction on. But if you want to list all these other things on there, because to your point, the ADA, we're already working, we already have those laws that we need to abide by, and we always go one step above that as well. Robin?
I think Lauren just brought up a good point, and I just want to kind of piggyback on that is, you know, you're talking about equal pay, and I was looking at like the veteran stuff, and then, you know, talking about crime-free. I mean, to me, those are things they should be doing anyway.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like we shouldn't have to be negotiating with them. So I know that's probably not the way things work. But maybe there is like a list too of things that we would really want every business, whether they're a new business, a redeveloped business, or an existing business, to be a part of these particular Tempe programs, right? And then maybe it's expanded beyond that. I mean, to me, because it's almost like two different things, I just feel like those are things that we should all be talking about, the importance of every business should be a part of it if you want to be part of the Tempe family.
And that's part of, that is it. But again, I want to go back. The framework is the big item stuff that we talked about.
I agree.
That falls underneath. These all, some way, somehow will fall under, you know, we look at quality of life. It all falls under there. I don't want to we're going to get into the weeds on all the other stuff because we already should be doing it and we already are doing it.
This is my last comment, and I'll be done on this because I know we're getting tired of this conversation. But to go to Councilmember Arredondo Savage's point, I think there are certain things that should just be required, right? But don't necessarily show up really well on our citizen satisfaction survey, like the veteran-friendly certification or crime-free multifamily housing. And the reason we put together this list was because there are things that I don't even care what's on this list. I'm going to ask every single apartment complex for crime-free multifamily housing. And maybe nobody else does, or maybe they don't need my vote, so they don't say yes, but I'm always going to ask for it.
Is that part of it?
No, it's not. I just ask for it in every single development meeting, so when it comes up here, they just miraculously are doing it. Like,
Should be.
right, but it should be. And so that's why maybe we don't vote, but maybe if we have a list of like required, important.
Big ones.
Yeah, just so that staff has some clear direction that, look, even if it didn't make our list,
Be
all of us are
encouraged.
going to probably be asking for crime-free
We can get-
multifamily housing. So maybe there's just an A and a B list. Maybe it's
Maybe.
simpler than that. But I just,
We'll let you guys figure it out.
yeah, good luck with that.
So if we could give direction for Don and Rosa to work with the to work with Elizabeth and with community services on some of the things that we've talked about, I think that helps with the social needs. I think if you guys come up together with a plan of that nature and come back to the council with this list and look at the big picture, the big items that we've all talked about: affordable housing, traffic, sustainability, where am I here? Transportation, education, human services. Those are the,
Everything. That's the whole list.
that's everything in the big umbrella under that, but that's the big ones that we're looking at, and that's what we should, hopefully we can focus on, as well as, did I say sustainability?
Yes.
You've said it all, I think.
Would that be it then? Did we decide, is that the consensus?
Like there should be some collapsing of categories. You think about donations to school foundations, maybe it should be donations, and then there's a list of possible areas, because there's some multiple listings here. Or we could also, we don't have naming rights, for example, and that's a possibility for, that's
That's
not
a good point.
definitely happening in each and every one, but we've proposed, developers have come to us saying, looking for naming rights for, that they're interested in, so perhaps that's within the donation framework. But it seems like some could be collapsed together.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I think we have
Clear.
clear
more clarification
direction.
that we need to
Yes,
give, the
keep
big
it
picture
broad.
items.
And just to be
But
clear,
work with-
sometimes those broad picture, like human services or sustainability, for example, we have about 4 performance measures under sustainability. So just for our clarity and for Donna for negotiations, it would be kind of the developer identifying how they would help advance some of those performance measures, whether it's carbon reduction or energy savings, things like that.
And the citizen satisfaction survey would be incorporated in this.
Okay.
And work with community services, human services. Elizabeth, she put the list together to begin with, try to collapse that.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Good. Partnerships.
Yeah, it should be skilled labor, that's the larger category.
Okay. All right. Future agenda items. One thing I want to ask the colleagues if I could, where am I here? If I could ask the police chief if she could report back to us on the park security plan. I think if we can get an update, I think our next IRS is in January. If we can get an update on our park security plan in January so that we can, by then the program will be underway in 2 months, and we should have some information and data for us. If that's okay with the council, if we can get a report from our
January
police chief,
17th.
January 17th. If we can get a status of where we are, chief, is that okay? Thank you. Anyone else have any future agenda items?
And she's ready tonight.
Randy?
This Saturday, I helped out at an event for a pit bull adoption event put on by Paws, and at that event, I had a conversation with an animal rights attorney, specifically around so-called bully breeds. So I would we had some really innovative ideas about things that different cities around the country are doing So I would like the Animal Safety and Welfare Working Group to look at so-called bully breed advocacy, education, and protection issues in Tempe.
Who's on that committee? You?
Me, Lauren, and Jennifer.
Jennifer.
That's not issue, are we talking issue review right now?
The future agenda items, yeah, this is,
You
yeah.
skipped ahead a little bit.
Oh, did I?
Oh, he is.
I'm not. That's
Yeah.
not when I say that.
Yeah, just under the- that's what
But-
Trying to skip the pre-discussion, yeah.
I thought that was.
Yes, Lauren?
And I see that Vision Zero is slated for, what is it, May 2019? Is it possible to move that up? That will have been, I think.
Vision
is-
Zero? Check.
Well, or maybe even just
Shelley
in.
here?
Shelley's here, yeah, I can,
Um,
let's find out.
It has been, I think maybe it's a year from last time we had an
That's why
update,
it's
but
May, I think that's when it was
maybe
originally
because I think
approved.
there's been so many high-profile and horrible and tragic incidents, and there's been so much in our mailbox with people writing to us about.
Certainly. Shelley Seiler, Deputy Public Works Director. So I know that our staff is going out for the general public meetings in March. I can check in to see if we can advance the council presentation a little further than that, but we're giving time to actually writing that draft plan and getting that public input before we come back to you. So I will check in with Julian to see if we can move it up to perhaps April or May. I know they were just trying to give themselves enough time to get the information together so they could present it to you.
How many public outreach meetings are we having?
I believe it's 2, but I can confirm for sure what those are.
One on a weekend and one in the evening?
Definitely, that's our plan.
Thank you very much.
Currently set for May 2nd, but we'll look to see whether or not we can move it up to one of the 2 April meetings, given the fact that the public process won't be done until March.
Sure.
Okay?
All right,
So
that's it. We will close that portion of the agenda. If we could take a 5-minute recess and come back for the work study, that would be great, or committee of the whole.
It wasn't me.
bad idea.
We're adjourned until we come back to committee of the whole.
Use back.
All right, we're going to go ahead and reconvene the committee of the whole. So the next item on our agenda is a call to the audience for the committee of the whole items listed under section 4A and 4B. Audience members have up to 3 minutes to address the council. We already did ask for comments, so you don't need to repeat those. Is there any additional comments that, if you have not spoken, if you would like to speak, could you please get my attention on any of the items listed on the committee of the whole? Seeing none, I'll close that portion and we'll go to item 4A1, which is the Tempe pre-funding. Ms. Quinn.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Kristen Gwynn, City of Tempe Council Aide. I know that, oh wait, do we have our, wait. I know that you had a presentation over the summer from education staff on how the Tempe program was going, the outcomes that have been measured so far, but I wanted to give you just a brief recap and then include a little bit of new information along with the recommendations of the working group. So the first slide here is actually an overview of how Tempe Pre fits into the city's strategic plan, impacts the priorities and performance measures that you all have identified and approved. So the primary performance measure for Tempe Pre is on the number of children in quality early learning settings. That's increasing. We're currently at 38% on our way to that 45, and that includes the 360 seats currently offered through Tempe Pre. Staff also anticipates improvement in some of these secondary measures, including third grade reading level, high school graduation rates, and Achieve 65. What you do see in this first year and a half is that not only is Tempe increasing the number of 3- and 4-year-olds in the quality early learning environment, but they're also seeing big gains in kindergarten readiness, and I'll speak to that more in a couple of slides. So this is a slide you've seen before from staff, but I know you're all aware of the long-term impacts of quality preschool on our students, but these are just a few of the items on the list, specifically the increase in negative outcomes the city could see in the absence of quality preschool, higher dropout rates, increases in teen parenting and special education placement, lower rates of college attendance, and higher rates of arrest for violent crime. Another positive aspect of Tempe Pre is the investment the city has made in our teachers. The program provides ongoing trainings designed to add to the teachers' knowledge base and also provides coaches to help them optimize their classes. In essence, what you all did was hire the best teachers, and then staff went ahead and provided the resources to make them even better. The result of that is clear here. As you can see, when Tempe Pre is compared to similar programs in the city, Tempe rates higher in quality in every category. And this, of course, is the ultimate result of that investment. Tempe Pre students were measured in a variety of developmental categories at the beginning of the program and at the end of the first year, and you can see the comparison. At the start of Tempe Pre program, the majority of students scored below expectations in every category. At the end of their first year, a much larger majority of students were scoring at or above expectations in every category. So based on this first year data and the input staff is getting from families, it's fair to say that Tempe Pre is having a positive impact on the lives of students and on their entire families. So I want to briefly mention the extended learning hours. As a council, you made it a priority when you approved this pilot program in 2017 that it needed to be full day and it needed to be year-round in order to allow parents to work who may previously have struggled with childcare. Many of our Tempe Pre families take advantage of the extended hours and the summer programs, and we're now starting to see some definite economic impacts on those families. Of the families whose children have participated in Tempe Pre through this pilot, this is what they're telling us. About 40% are reporting going back to school. 91% have been able to go back to work or work more hours. 17% are reporting being able to get off of assistance programs or decrease programs like SNAP or TANF, and 18% have secured housing. So these are immediate economic impacts on these families, but their increased financial stability will ultimately come back to Tempe as they shop, pay rent, and otherwise return those benefits to the local community. As was previously reported to you in June, Tempe Pre has received a lot of statewide attention, with municipalities and counties all over the state expressing interest. Education staff has presented to many of these local governments on how the program works and the outcomes that we're beginning to see. But it's not just Arizona that's paying attention. In your packet is a letter from Tanya Rucker, the Program Director for Early Childhood Success with the National League of Cities. I hope you all got a chance to read it. It was actually very complimentary to all of you. For your investment in Tempe Pre, and specifically those of you who have spoken at various conferences and events locally and nationally on the strengths of the program and why Tempe initially made this investment. Dr. Rucker, as you can see here on this slide, considers Tempe Pre a national best practice that can be used as an example for cities all over the country. So that's where the program has been. The purpose of the working group when it was formed earlier this year was to determine where Tempe Pre might go from here. After 2 meetings and extensive discussion with staff, the working group believes the most sustainable long-term funding source for the program would likely be a small sales tax increase, not unlike the arts tax that was recently approved by Tempe voters. Just like that one, this proposed tax would also need voter approval, and so state law says the soonest you could send it to the ballot would be November of 2020. I should be clear that the working group is not giving any sort of final recommendation on a tax at this time, and their goal is to spend the next 18 to 24 months working through the details of what it might look like with a transparent process that would include a lot of public and stakeholder input, as well as feedback from all of you. The working group intends to bring ideas back to you regularly through updates so that you can all work together to craft what the final tax and program might include. The reason the working group is mentioning it now is because they wanted you all to be confident that there is a long-term plan and that they won't be returning to you in another 2 years to ask for more general fund dollars. So the working group has a basic outline for a long-term funding solution with details to be determined moving forward, but that left them with a more short-term problem to be addressed. A tax on the ballot in November of 2020 could provide funds as early as January of 2021, but the current pilot program is scheduled to end May 23rd of 2019 without any additional funding approved. So the working group is concerned that should you close the program during that 2-year gap, that would mean the loss of the teachers and program staff that you've invested in with substantial training, as they would be likely to find other jobs and not be available to restart the program in 2 years. They were also concerned about leaving the 144 3-year-olds currently in the program without a second year of curriculum to prepare them for kindergarten completely. So the question for the working group was how to protect the initial investment in the program and the progress Tempe Pre students are making by extending the current pilot program for an additional 2 years while minimizing the cost to the city. The working group asked staff to provide some options for a modified program that would bring costs down by allowing for some paid seats via a sliding scale. They provided 3 different configurations, all of which were in your packet, and the working group chose to move forward with option 3, which had the greatest cost savings while also preserving the largest number of low-income seats. As you can see on the slide, 216 students will be graduating and moving on to kindergarten this spring, leaving 144 of our 3-year-olds who would continue forward still fully subsidized. The 216 open seats would then be divided equally into thirds, with 1/3 being fully subsidized, 1/3 paying half tuition, and 1/3 paying full tuition based on family income. The addition of paid seats would bring down the cost of next year's program from $3 million to $2 million. In the second year of that gap, all of the seats would be divided into those same 3 groups, bringing the cost of that year down to $1.5 million and leaving you with a total 2-year program cost of $3.5 million, down from $6 million. It has always been the intent of the working group members to seek as much outside funding for this 2-year extension of the Tempe Pre-Pilot as possible. They've begun to work on the details of a corporate sponsorship program, and it has been mentioned that should the council approve, you could direct development staff to prioritize Tempe Pre for some of those public benefit dollars that sometimes come to the city as a part of the development process. They are also reaching out to private donors who may be interested in supporting the program as well. But the reality is that they're up against some hard deadlines. You have a program scheduled to end in May, and all of these funding options are likely to come in slowly over the course of the full 2 years of the program. Staff has indicated that if there is to be a Tempe pre-program next year, teacher contracts will need to be finalized in February. And if you choose to move forward with the new modified tuition structure, there's a need to start outreach right away, so those families who are newly eligible to participate and may not realize it can apply. So that brings us to the recommendation of the working group tonight. The group recommends that you approve a one-time commitment of $3.5 million for a 2-year extension of the current pilot program with the recommended adjustments for full and partial paid students. It has been suggested by Deputy City Manager and CFO Ken Jones that this could be accomplished without impact to any upcoming supplemental budget requests or the budget process in general by spending down the fund balance by $3.5 million or potentially less should there be private funds raised for year 2. And finally, to allow the working group members and staff to continue seeking outside funding to supplant or replace city funds to the degree possible. It's also been suggested that if a tax were to pass in 2020, it could go into effect in January of 21, providing 6 months of revenue before the next year of the program begins, which could be used to replace all or part of the funds spent by the city. And with that, I will leave you to your discussion and remind you that education staff is here if you have program questions, and Ken Jones is standing by to discuss the funding options if needed. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank the city council, the colleagues, for the work that you've done on this and coming up with various solutions and methods of how to attack, if you will, or to handle the situation, the solution. I mean, obviously, as I've said before, and we see in the presentation that it's easy to see that the kids and the families are really seeing a true benefit of the programs that's being offered. It's a tremendous benefit, and I think at the end of what you're recommending is the voters having a say. I think in the future, I think that's important as well. I also appreciate the working group coming to a model of that will help bring down the costs of this program that's really a sustainable sliding scale, if you will, because I think that's something that we're all looking at. And, you know, as we continue to make investments in the infrastructure that we talk about throughout the city, we've also made investments with, you know, obviously the teachers and these kids in the future. And I think it's important that we don't want to lose that teacher investment, as you mentioned before. If whatever we could do to find additional ways to reduce the operational costs for us, whether it's from outside donors, I think that's something I'd encourage the working group or anyone else to see if we could seek that. And finding, you know, funding partners, if you will. I think you mentioned we get a lot of national recognition. What can we do to build upon that? So I would task the working group to see what we can do to build on that national recognition and seeing the benefits, because there's got to be someone out there that would be willing to help with something of this nature to bring down the cost. And I know that you mentioned a tax, and I think that's important that we continue to get the stakeholders' input as the committee moves forward with that process, as was mentioned with some of the comments earlier, that we continue to get the input from our stakeholders on that. And I agree with what's been presented. Councilmember Keating.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to have a few comments to make about the presentation. Before I do that, I really want to thank staff for all their work on this. As Ms. Gwynn mentioned, we're kind of up against the clock on this, and you know, staff was able to come up with what I think is a very innovative solution to a complicated problem in very little time, and something that the working group was very pleased with. You know, we've all gotten the emails, we can read the slides, we've heard the testimony, we've been to, you know, the various events where we've heard from parents that, you know, Tempe Pre is no doubt a successful program, and you know, we're learning that the parents are able to go back to school, they're able to work more hours, the kids are benefiting from this program. So not only are we having a positive impact on the children, but we're having a positive impact on those parents. When I see stats like, you know, them going back to school or working more hours or getting off public assistance or being able to get secure housing as a result of not having the burden of childcare all day during the week, you know, I think these are real positive economic benefits that are coming to our city. And I understand, you know, there's definitely been concerns over the cost of the initial program, over the accessibility, over long-term solvency, and stakeholder participation, all of which this new working group is working to address, not only with our kind of a compromise model of the sliding scale, but the process that we are going to go through in regards to the long-term feasibility and life of the program. So I'm certainly committed to working with every stakeholder, having those meetings, working with the public to shape what the future of Tempe Pre is going to be. As Ms. Gwynn also mentioned, we have certain restrictions, through the legislature about what we can and cannot do with regards to funding. So really what we're looking for tonight, this is going to be kind of a two-step process. One is to continue the program under its new model, which you pointed out correctly, that it is significantly cheaper than the last model because we have introduced that sliding scale. We are maintaining those free seats for those in need, but we're offering up new seats to those that can afford to pay for it. And I actually just read a study was sent to me today by one of our school board members about the benefits of having mixed social and economic children in the same classroom. So I think that that's going to be, another positive aspect to the new model that we're proposing tonight. The council will certainly be a part of any long-term plan. We'll come back with updates. Stakeholders will be a part of those plans as well. But what we're really looking for is to continue the Tempe Pre program until such time as we have the authority to introduce either find new revenue or collect new revenue or find private or some public-private partnerships to help offset the amount of funding needed to maintain the program. So, I'll wrap up in just a second. During my campaign, and I've said this before, people would ask me, what can the city do about education? And I really never had an answer for them because it's a state issue, and we can pass our bonds and our overrides, but that's really about it. But this is something that didn't occur to me at the time, and didn't occur to me until we actually developed a program that we're making a commitment to education in the city, and the legislature clearly is interested in funding education, and the people of Tempe are clearly interested in having quality education because they keep passing the bond overrides. So, I think with the sliding scale, with the knowledge that we're going to work with the public, we're going to work with stakeholders, we're going to look for those additional outside funding opportunities, I think we should definitely move forward here, make the program whole for the next year and a half, 2 years, and then continue to work together and continue to work with everyone else, and take in their ideas. I'm sure there's ways that we could kind of change it around more to make it more feasible or more palatable to a larger group of people. We are going to do that. So this is not the end of Tempe Pre-K after 2 years, but this is just to get us to a larger discussion about what the city's role in education is going to be. So those are my comments.
Councilman Navarro?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just want to say, and Randy said it all. I mean, there's really nothing much to add on to that. It was well done. But I just have to say the working group, hands down, I mean, this is a great option, exploring the abilities to how do we offset this cost? How do we make it usable for all Tempe members or all Tempe residents, so to speak? I think this is just an outstanding format that we're proposing right now. I believe it has the ability to get better. I just on a national level, when I went out to NLC during the summer, this topic was brought up in my conference with Hilo and with other constituent groups in that arena. And this subject was by far one of those issues, along with homelessness and some other things. But it was a topic of how do we tackle this, and hearing from various cities across the nation on how they're going about it with different strategies. It was clear by far we had the best strategy. I mean, I was able to speak on things that we're doing that other cities have just no idea how to manage or how to maneuver through, which I think was kind of eye-opening to not only NLP staff, but to other cities across the nation. And with that, we truly do have a model that, I'm fortunate enough, we did it at the time when we experimented with this. We had the ability to use leaseback agreements from development deals, which, some cities have the ability to do that within their plan to get the program started, that's just an outstanding use of money. But the long and short of it is, with our ability.
Joel, you got to speak in a
fine
mic.
tune this.
We can't understand you.
I'm,
Are you
we
swimming?
Can you hear
honestly
me now?
cannot
Are
understand
you
you.
in the pool?
I apologize. I don't know if it's just the area it sounds.
Still can't hear you. You got to talk into the
Okay.
phone.
I apologize.
I am talking into the phone. I just can't get it. It's just not coming in clear.
Okay.
So the last thing we heard was the long and short of it. Could you just repeat the sentence after that?
Let me, okay. Nationally, I just think that this is just an outstanding program that actually is going to deserve a lot of attention. I think that we'll be able to parlay that locally and to help even offsetting some costs here fundraising. But I apologize. I thought you guys could hear me.
Why does he schedule things on
Okay.
Thursdays? He does them all the time.
Vice Mayor Kuby.
So first of all, I want to thank so much our city staff, Naomi Farrell from Human Services and Marie Raymond, who've led this program from the beginning, from its inception, and David Shapira there in the background, whose passion this was to bring this to the council originally. And I also want to thank Chris Bush, our superintendent at Tempe Elementary Schools. And without the school district's participation and complete embrace of this program, we wouldn't see the spectacular success. And Randy, you focused on the economic impacts and benefits, and just that one slide you showed with the developmental leaps that these kids have made in 1 year, it's just been this twin benefit of economic impacts to the family and to the workforce, but also the impacts on our children, not just now, but these kids will have benefits of this for their entire lives, so it's been amazing. But I also I don't want to get emotional here, and I won't, so I'm not going to get emotional. I'm going to just say, Randy, you've been an amazing leader in this working group, and you've really taken on a lot of the challenges we had and the worries and concerns that we had in coming back to council and wanting to be fiscally responsible, wanting to create a sustainable funding model for the future. We know there's some time out with that. We originally thought we could maybe go to the taxpayers in March of 2018. That's not a possibility because of legislative rules, so it has to be November 2020. And then we had Ken Jones, our finance director, who's made us recently aware of the impact that we could not really impact supplemental budgets, but by looking at spending down the fund balance, that would be a way to have less impact on the budget. Now, if you all recall, the way we funded this program originally was through restricted revenues, through land use sales and leases. And to me, that made a lot of sense because we're having impact from development, and we weren't able to tell developers we want to build affordable housing. We're not able to mandate that, but we can help mitigate and almost an antidote to some of that, the impacts, negative impacts development can have on the community, was to say, okay, we're going to give working families a little leg up. We're going to find this program. We're going to fund this program. We're going to study it, make sure we know what we're doing, and we have experts brought to bear. And we reached out to the philanthropic community, and we had so much success in raising funds, not for the operations of the program, but for the training and development of our staff. And can you tell me, Ms. Gwynn, what was the exact number we had for the philanthropic dollars that came in to support?
I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I would imagine Marie probably has it handy. The exact number of grant dollars that we got?
For the
$2.5 million in grant
$2.5 million
dollars.
that was brought in by staff. And originally we thought maybe we should approach some private daycare centers and see if they're willing to be partners. And we found pretty quickly that they couldn't be because they didn't offer the same high-quality daycare, the high-quality pre-K that we offer here. So that's an amazing testament to our staff, to our citizens, and to the school districts and the teachers. So, we worked really long and hard on this issue. The timing was such that we had to come to you now and look for gap funding. And we ultimately do want to have a sustainable funding model. And again, I thank you so much, Randy, for your leadership in bringing us to this point.
Councilor Granville.
Thank you. So one thing that I think Councilmember Keating mentioned, which I'm not sure, it's just different than my understanding, and it was about we'll have mixed income individuals. My understanding is that in the program now, my understanding when I read it was that it's still capped at people at 200%. It's not now. So now anyone can go in and they would just pay full price.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me of what the new
About the slating
income.
styles. Okay.
So yeah, so the folks at that 200% or below would still be the fully subsidized seats, I believe. And then at higher income levels, we'd have folks who were paying partially or paying full tuition.
Confirmation of that? It's a third, a third, a third. So a third of the seats are going to go to the 200 and under. Those will be
New
free
seats. The new seats.
And then a third will be somewhat subsidized on income level, and then a third will be full price. And the idea is that those paying, either some or full price will help subsidize the ones that are getting it for free, which is why its cost is, 60% of what it was originally going to be.
I think, I applaud the creative thinking you guys did, and I'm happy to accept the proposal. There's a couple of things I would say, though. Number one, I think this is exactly what you spend the fund balance down for, to get another year or two. I mean, the reason that it was such a close, the discussion that came around when you called it, actually, was we need to have some data to prove this program. The program did prove the program. And what it's getting for its trouble is not all the funding it needs, but it wildly proved itself. And so I think it did exactly what we asked it to. So I think in that sense, for those individuals that would normally not pay, I think it should still be free. And I'd be hard pressed to have something else in our budget put in front of me that I would put above this. Because it relates to crime, and it relates to education, and it relates to affordable housing, and it relates to livability, and it relates to so many things, and our 65 program. It's just it's the single. This is going to sound really odd to say. Like, I had nothing to do with this program, but I would say it will be the single most important thing that happens while I'm on council, right? And it's a shame that it's not able to see itself out to a permanent funding model. And the thing I would just leave you, one more thing I'll leave you with. So right now, ASU's tuition, if you're in state, is about $10,000 a year as an undergraduate. Except in our Constitution, it says higher education shall be nearly as free as possible. And yet somehow, lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, they've determined that number means, that phrase means practically nothing. Once you open this up to a sliding scale, that scale will always slide based on funding. And so my concern is that we will have a situation someday where we're in the ASU model, where nearly as free as possible means not at all free, right? Because as $1.5 million becomes $1.3 million, and now we're in a recession, and it concerns me that we're setting a precedent that can never be undone. And so the thing I would say to you as you go forward and look at that long-term model, I absolutely support putting on a ballot, but I think one of the things that has to be on that ballot measure is not a nearly as free as possible language. It has to be very clear that at a certain dollar amount or a certain threshold, it is always, always, always free. And I'm worried that today we're setting the precedent for that mechanism to hurt funding gaps, as a result of funding gaps.
Robin?
No. Or you want to address that or go ahead?
Well, yeah, actually. So, I agree with, I guess, I don't agree. I understand your concerns. I totally understand your concerns, and we are going to come up with a long-term permanent model for Tempe Pre in the city. And I do think that, you are correct in that, ASU costs more than it did 10 years ago, and it's not nearly as free as possible, but that's not really on ASU. That's more of a product of the legislature continually cutting their funding, and at some point they have to make themselves whole. So, would there be a scenario where that sliding scale kind of moves to the point where there are no free seats? I'm totally open to, trying to lock in, as you suggest, a certain level, whatever that level may be. We could, lock that in. But something I really like about this program is that it's scalable when times are good, like now, that we can add additional seats, add additional subsidized seats as we add additional paid seats. So, I think you're correct in that, if we do take this to the ballot, the language is going to be very, very, very important. And we need to make sure that we're preserving the spirit of the program, which was, to provide a leg up to those that don't get that very often in life. So, I understand your concerns. I think that this is something the working group will definitely consider. as it moves forward, as it talks with stakeholders and members of the public. The last thing I want to see is something being taken away from somebody that was counting on it.
Father?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things. I think a lot of really great things. And I don't think anybody around this table that's going to dispute the importance or the significance or the impact that this program or any early education program has not only on our Tempe community, on our youth, but on the families that have been connected, which to me is what it's really been great to be able to see. Not just the benefit for the students, the hard work of the teachers, so thank you guys so very much for that. Definitely the hard work and commitment and dedication to not only our staff, but to Chris Bush, who has always, from the very beginning, since I've been a council member and before when I was a board member, has always been willing to work and partner to try to find solutions and really improve anything that they can, not only for the students, but for families. And so I know Randy brought up something. He said, well, what can we do in education? Well, I got to tell you, I mean, since I've been elected to this seat, I have continually championed for education from day one. Marie Raymond wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Joel and I and the working group that we put together to talk about how important it is for the city of Tempe to get engaged and involved in education. So I don't think there's anybody around this table that says education is not important to the city of Tempe. And Marie, I got to thank you, because I bet you when you first got hired, you had no idea. This is kind of what you'd be working on and spending a lot of time doing it. But I got to say kudos to you and to the team of everybody that's really been involved, because not only to see the impact that it's had, but the auxiliary impacts, I think people don't really take that into consideration. And that's one of the things that this community strives to do, this city we want to do, is make sure that everybody has access to the resources and that the resources are available to the people that want it. And maybe they don't even know that they exist. So I certainly do appreciate that. And I love the fact that we can continue to evolve our partnership, Chris Bush. And I got to tell you, I say thank you, because you can have or want as many partners, but if that partner is not willing to step up and be committed and do the work, it's never going to work. And Chris, you have always been willing to sit at the table and really work hard to make things happen. So thank you so very much for that. I really do appreciate it. And I got to tell you, I think that the working group came up with a really creative method in regards to funding. I agree, and with some of the concerns I heard, though, in regards to the sliding scale. I thought that was something that we should have done a long time ago, but I get it, and we're here now, and I think that's really important to incorporate a sliding scale for others that want to pay, but I don't want it to be so it supplements and it's on the back of those people that are paying 100% either. I think that we've got to figure out a way where that if you're paying 50% or you're paying 100%, that 100% is still like a good market rate, because it benefits this community for anybody to have a quality preschool. And I don't think that we should prevent them because they can go get it cheaper somewhere else. I mean, so I think we need to look at the economic impact, not just how it's going to help support the program, but really how it's going to help support the community as a whole. Because I think that's really, really important. So let me just finish, because I mean, I'm sure the working group can kind of work through that and figure that out. The one thing, and I will just say, is I'm a super process person. Everybody knows that. I know you're kind of shocked that I would say this. That I don't know how many working meetings you guys have had. It's really, really hard for me to, and a struggle, to be here in this meeting, knowing that there hasn't been any public meeting with any public notes or anything like that. So for people to really be able to give their thoughts and their feedback, you know, good or bad. Because I mean, I think you said it, Randy, it's important to have all the stakeholders be part of our major decisions. And when we say, you know, 3.5 million over 2 years, that is a major decision. I think we had more public meetings for little libraries. So, I mean, I think we need to really, really think about the way we do things and make sure that we are consistent with our process, because I feel like that is my responsibility to the residents of this community, to make sure that we are fair and consistent in the way that we do things. So, you know, and I get it, and I think this is a really worthy cause. I think the idea of utilizing the one-time funds to spend down the reserves, I totally get that. I really do get that. I am super concerned about it being on the ballot. Not that I would oppose it, but just knowing how Tucson's failed, you know, just recently, but they only got a 34% support rate. I mean, to me, that's really worrisome. So I think that's a big hill to climb, right? So, you know, my thought is, I get it, I appreciate all the work. I think this is definitely something that we need to continue to figure out long-term, how we can keep it funded. And it's frustrating to me to see $2.5 million of grant money and not any of it can be used for operations. That to me is baffling, so it would be good to maybe do a little bit more of a deep dive and figure out like who those partners are that have given the 2.5, how those 2.5 has been spent, and is there a way that we could kind of manipulate the money that we use, to kind of backfill some of those things. So I think we need to think about flexibility on that, but I will say, for me, the public input piece is very, very important. So, that's all. Thank you,
Let me
Mayor.
go to Jennifer, and then we'll go back to you. Jennifer?
First of all, I completely support the pre-K program and know that it helps children prepare for not only kindergarten, but really the rest of their lives. So I am a supporter of the pre-K program. I too, I basically concur with everything Robin said, and I just want to reiterate that I'm concerned about the lack of outreach, public outreach. We had 3 public meetings about the AVs, yet we've had 0 about this program. And I think our residents, our Chamber of Commerce, our neighborhoods deserve to have input in this process. And so I would like to ask the city to please reach out and coordinate those meetings with the stakeholders. I'm not concerned about, I'm concerned about the process, not the results. This is a award-winning program, and I think it's a great program, but we have to pay attention to the process and include our stakeholders. And second, I would like to have Ken Jones come up and explain the fund balance spend down that's being proposed in this proposal. Thanks.
Mayor, can I address?
Yeah. Ken?
No.
We'll get to you in a second, man. Let's get this, since it's right here. Ken, and then we'll get to Councilmember Keating.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Ken Jones, Deputy City Manager. The spend down of the fund balance that's being proposed, as I understand it, and I've attended the meeting, so I understand it pretty well, is that this $3.5 million is an investment to get the program through to the proposed tax increase. So what Kristen said is correct. What I said was, if we spend $3.5 million now and you pass a tax that funds the program in the future, I assume that tax will cover things much like the arts tax did, so that Marie's salary would be shifted to the tax out of the general fund and would be picked up by the tax. Other costs that we're currently spending out of the general fund to support the program would shift to that tax, which would actually benefit the general fund and over a long period of time would repay the money to the general fund. So from that perspective, it's an investment. So what I told them was, I wouldn't curtail what the departments would get in supplemental funding next year, because we intend to spend down the fund balance for the next 5 years anyway. If for some reason the tax didn't pass or you all decided not to continue with this program, then that's $3.5 million that could have been spent on anything, and it wasn't an investment. It was $3.5 million that you could have spent. So to the extent that you expect to get a permanent funding source that takes some of the burden off of the general fund, then it's an investment and it's returned. So that's my perspective on it. And we have money in the general fund because of what you all have done in terms of enticing people to come here with high-paying jobs and economic development, and the circle of life is working. People look at our high levels of education and they locate here, and we get more development money, and then we invest that money in education, and this seems to be working. So that's why we have the fund balance that we do.
Councilmember Keating.
Well, first, I need to thank Superintendent Bush as well. And you would think after 2.5 years of doing this, I would be good enough to remember to do that, but Vice Mayor Kuby and Councilmember Hernando Savage reminded me. I would like to thank Superintendent Bush for her support for this program and taking the time to listen to us come here and drone on and show some support. So I do really appreciate that. I'd like to address some of Robin's concerns about, specifically about the, I think you're absolutely right. We have to show value to people that would otherwise be paying a full price. And that's something that Councilmember Navarro has brought up in our last working group meeting. And that will definitely be part of some sort of larger program moving forward, because we need to make sure that if it is a tax, and I want to be clear that the working group right now is not recommending a tax. We're going to look at various options, but that seems to be the most sensible right now. But there's other things that could happen over the next year. We just want to get to the point where that if we do come back and say, yeah, we think this is worth putting a tax on the ballot, then that's the time to do it, and we have the authority to do it at that time. So, November 2020, we'll have invested $8-9 million in preschool programs in the city of Tempe. So I think it does make sense at that point to say to the voters, hey, is this something that you want us to continue, spending money on? And let the voters chime in. Maybe they say no. They say no, I would obviously be very disappointed, but we still would have provided a public service to many Tempeans if that be the case. And so we have time here to look for other solutions and other sources of revenue as we try to make this program solvent in the long term. And we're going to do that. We're going to exhaust. We're going to every corner, every shadow. We are going to look for innovative, creative ways to make sure that we are benefiting as many Tempeans as we possibly can without spending a lot of city money. And as far as the public meeting and public input point, this is an extension of a pilot program. So to me, like I understand the need for public input as we move forward to a longer term, more solvent, sustainable model. But this is an extension of an existing program. So given that and the time constraints, I'm not sure we had the opportunity to have those meetings, to go to the public, have several public input meetings, because again, we are continuing an existing program, and we're going to then look at altering that program in a pretty significant way coming up here the next 6 months to a year. And at that point, we'll certainly bring in the chamber, we'll certainly bring in other stakeholders, we'll certainly, reach out to the public. We'll make sure that everyone's voice is heard in this program. And as I said in my initial statement, I want something that's palatable to everyone. In my dream world, this comes back and this is a 7-0 vote because we've all participated, we've all heard from our different constituency groups, and we've addressed all those concerns. And it comes to a point where we can look back and say, look, there are no real risks or no real issues here. And I think we can definitely get there. The working group is committed to doing that. That's really it. I mean, I just want to assure everybody that this is not going to be, some sort of bait and switch, something like that. This is going to be a very open, public, deliberative, and unfortunately, long process.
Councilman Granville, then Vice Mayor Kuby.
Thank you, Mayor. And I don't know if this would be for Ken or for you, Kristen. So under this blended model, what will be the city of Tempe's cost for the next, I see the 3 different ones, and I think I understand the chart. I think it's like, under the blended model, I think it's like 2 million-ish.
2 million for the first of the 2 years.
Okay. And so 4 million over the 2 years until potentially.
3.5.
No.
So
3.5.
the second year would be cheaper.
Okay.
Because we don't have those 144 already free kids rolling over.
I
So it'll be
think
all
that means
thirds.
that my understanding is correct then. So the difference between this blended model and continuing the free model for people that are 200% is $500,000?
No, it would have been 6 million for the 2 years under the existing model. And now it's going to be 3.5.
Well, but the first year, so the shortfall is 2.5 million if we were to continue the way we are.
Yes.
Okay. What is, my recollection is that our reserve that we're spending down is more than 2.5 million. It is. Okay.
What is it?
Do you know what it is off the top of your head?
The general fund.
The reserve that we're spending down.
Well, we're taking $3.5 million out of a fund balance that's currently at about 40% of annual revenues, when our policy says 20 to 30%.
Right.
So
and my question is, what's that delta?
About 19 million.
Right. And so this is the part that confuses me, is it would be one thing if we were already at our spend down level, but we're not. We're not. Like, this is money we are planning to spend down. So I don't know what else we would spend it down on if not for this.
So, Councilmember, we have a lot of.
I'm sure we do.
We do. You can't say that.
But the point is,
you're so easy to say that, Councilman
but
Granville.
the point I'm trying to make is yes, there are other things on our to-do list. For sure there are. But it's not like this isn't money that exists. And I understand, and I know it's not about the money. But the thing I would go as to the issue of public meetings, I get the need for public meetings, but I agree. It's a continuing program. the one thing I would say, and I've only said this maybe once or twice ever, back a million years ago when Corey was on council, we had a vote about LGBT equality. And I got a bunch of emails. We all got emails on council about why it was the end of the world if we voted on it. And my response was always the same. Like, vote me out of office. Like, this is so core to my values. Like, I actually would rather not be in office than vote the way you're telling me to vote. Like, I'm cool with this. I sleep well at night here. This is one of those same issues to me. I just don't know what we would wait on.
Vice Mayor?
Just to speak to your point and to one of Councilmember Aradona Savage's points, but we have a lot of needs, as we all say, but we have a deep commitment to really increasing our affordable housing stock in every which way possible. And so, no, this is an ingredient to it, but that we need to also think about restoring and really funding fully our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I mean, there's a lot of needs. Everybody could come up with a list, but one of the reasons we want to do this is we want to, the next year and a half, have the opportunity, 2 years, to be a pilot for whatever the program will be after that. And whatever the program will be after that, we still want to do free, completely free for 200% of poverty level, perhaps even a higher poverty level, but allows us to look at that element of a sliding scale for those people above the poverty level, above that higher mark or lower mark, and allows us to look at the efficacy of introducing it to people who don't necessarily need the help, the financial help. So it allows us to kind of add on to the pilot in a different way, sort of add a complexity, but we know that if we did do a tax and it was approved by the voters, we would have, I think, $9 million a year out of that tax conservatively. Is that a?
It depends on what tax rate you approve.
Right, if it was 1/10 of a cent.
If it were 1/10 of a
$1
percent,
penny on every
exactly the
$10.
same as the arts tax, we would expect it to generate about $9 million in
Right,
2020.
and we know, so we know that we would have more than we need to fully fund what we're already doing and then some. So this is our opportunity to look at that. The other thing I want to talk about, and this is an item that you brought up, Robin, about Tucson's initiative, and that concerns you, and that concerned me when it was turned down because I thought Tucson's following Tempe, but in reality, theirs was a private school voucher system, and like Tempeans, I think Tucsonians recognize that private school vouchers are not the way to go and not to really support private schools. So that was a kind of a rejection of vouchers and not a rejection of free pre.
Okay, I think we do have consensus with option 3, but before we go there, I'm going to have Councilmember Adams and then Councilmember Aradona Savage, and then we'll close with Councilmember Keating.
I just want to address one of Colby's concerns.
So I'm concerned that we've committed $6 million for this program, and we haven't had one public outreach meeting. I don't think that's acceptable, even though it's a pilot program.
We did when it started.
13 public meetings. Sorry, I shouldn't interrupt you.
That was my understanding. So if we have early on, then I'm good with it. But we haven't had anything for, what, a year or more?
Continuation, for sure we have.
And none for this next step. I guess that's what I'm getting to. Our next step is if we approve this money, then we haven't had any public outreach meetings for that, for our next step.
Thank you, Mayor.
Robin?
I mean, and I get that. I just want to clarify, listen, I mean, I feel like you guys are really putting words in my mouth, and this is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I think this is a very creative method to fund the gap. I really, really do. I think that early education is valuable. This proves it. It's the continuum of education. I know that's something that Marie's worked on since she's been here and how important it is. They need to get a great start, and to be able to connect with the family, to me, is just a double bonus. So you guys are making it sound like that's not what we're saying. All I'm saying is I don't disagree with Jennifer in the sense that public input, when we make large decisions with $3.5 million, is very important to my core being, to who I am and the way I make decisions. So I want to say, when we talked about public meetings, and I do not want to get in that argument again, that the way that we've created the need for public input when we have our working groups, was I think created because of this committee to begin with. So I think, to me, it should have even been elevated to think like, whoa, wait, you know what? We brought on a new element into the way we do things in the process because of this committee back in the day. So all I'm saying is, I think as a council, we need to be very cognizant of process and consistent and fair. That's all I'm asking. I'm not here to argue. I'm just stating my point and my opinion and how I feel. That's all.
Randy?
Thank you.
And then we're going to close this out.
We'll wrap it up. Okay, yeah, so, if I'm understanding Councilmember Granville's question correctly, it's why do it this way if we have the funds to continue on the way that it currently is operating? And that was something we definitely considered. But the working group wanted something more palatable to the rest of the council, more sustainable in the long term, and something that's important to me that would be scalable in case we decide to do a dedicated tax, or we decide to dedicate more of our existing revenue to this program. So, we really wanted to be innovative on the approach we were going to take, and it was a big concern of Vice Mayor Kuby and myself and Councilman Navarro that those that got the first year, subsidized, continue on with subsidies. I'm totally fine with locking in some sort of metric to make sure that those seats are still there. I'm very pleased with what we've come back with. I'm pleased with the comments that we've heard. And I can just, I'm hearing this public process, and look, I don't disagree. There will be a robust, you have my word, there's going to be a robust stakeholder and public process when we come back for the larger scale plan. And that's going to be, a year from now, maybe not that long. But, this is going to be, when we come back, this is going to be something that I would hope would be very palatable to everyone at this table, and that we can all agree to move forward. So it's.
I want to commend everyone. And this is something this shows the dedication of the city and our staff and our stakeholders, because we will, as Councilman mentioned about the public comment, it's involvement. It's important. I also understand the timeline that we're put under that was also put in the presentation of when contracts go out for teachers. And if we're going to continue something with an investment we've had, we don't want to throw everything out because we've already invested those precious dollars. I can't stress enough, we already have a scalable program with our Kids Zone program that has a sliding scale. This fits within exactly what we're doing with the model within our city, having a sliding scale with the pre-K. I think it's very robust. I think it is innovative as we continue to look at other ways to make this work. I also want to point out that, we are a community that cares. And by caring, this is one step further. We're not done. We need everybody's help and everybody's input. Again, there was a short time frame that we had to work with, so we wouldn't lose the funding. We have been fiscally responsible as a city, and knowing the downs and the ups and cyclical times of the economics since I've been on council. When I first got on council, we were booming. The dot-com bubble burst. We came roaring back. The housing boom came 08, 9, and 10, and that was the greatest recession we've seen, and we're still trying to dig ourselves out. It's important to have those reserves, and there is a plan. As Ken mentioned, it's a 5-year spend down plan to get to where we are as a fund balance. We don't want to do it all at once. So being fiscally responsible, looking at what happened, hey, we've seen what's happened with cost of construction has gone up dramatically. I know regional projects that we worked with MAG have 68% increase in certain transportation costs. That's real. We got other projects that are happening that are public works projects that are increasing costs. It's important to make sure that we are fiscally responsible, and we're doing that. And I want to thank our staff and Ken and his staff and the entire city staff on everything that we're doing to be responsible. And this is a responsible. The only thing I do agree with that's been made in the comments is the public outreach and the public input. That's something that we rely heavily on as a process. And we've talked about it through this entire council agenda, the important process and public input. So the consensus is to move forward with option 3, and we continue the public dialogue and make sure we have the stakeholders in. And I think we're good with that.
We have public outreach in January.
Mayor, if I could just clarify one thing. So I know that what recommendation 3 is, and that continues us along the road here. But if there's money that has to be spent between now and June that wasn't previously budgeted, we're going to have to come back to you and ask for some kind of a transfer from somewhere else. And then I think what you're saying is make sure in the upcoming budget process that we bring back to you an option to fund pre-K in the following year. So you're not making budget decisions tonight. You don't get to approve budgets informally. You have to approve it in a more formal manner.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's what you're saying is kind of prepare for that, and we would do that.
Yes.
Okay.
We're good?
There's
All right.
one more decision or direction.
Okay.
There's one more direction that you would ask for, and that's whether we could instruct economic development staff to bring it up as an interest for developers of looking at naming rights or looking at opportunities to donate funds as part of a development agreement. And that's
That was something that staff had said they could do with your direction.
Yeah.
It's on the list. The education funds. It's on the list.
Right, but is pre-K on the list?
It's the education fund.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
We wanted formal, the staff explicitly asked for that to have formal authorization to do
The
that.
education funding is on there.
What comes back?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We're clear, right?
Bristol.
Option 3.
I'm clear.
All right. New items from council consideration. We don't have any. Any updates of items in progress from the council? Vice Mayor?
Yes, I wanted to, I noticed taken off of the list was the tiny houses, ADUs, and it's back. But we're going to have something in a Friday packet about the tiny houses, and actually it's called the Micro Estates Project. But more importantly, we're going to be bringing back the ADU ordinance. But we decided because it's been about 6 months that we should go back and have a public meeting about it.
A little more than 6 months, but I'm glad you're having a public meeting.
Yeah, no, we were actually had it on it. No, we had it on a second read, I believe, to vote on it. And in deference to a number of members of the public who were concerned about the impacts of SB 1350.
It was just a little more than 6 months ago.
No, it wasn't. I can
Was it?
show you
All
the
right,
date.
all right, fair enough.
So do you remember SB 1350? Because of SB 1350,
Oh, I remember.
folks from Tempe Neighbors Talking were concerned about that perhaps there could be some unforeseen, unintended consequences of the ADU ordinance. So they asked us to stay it for a while.
I absolutely remember
So
that.
we did in respect for that. So we want to put it back on the agenda for discussion, put that working group back up. Sounds good.
Sounds good. We're good with that? I think we should put that working group back in.
Yep.
All right, Councilmember Keating?
Yeah, I just want to give a quick update on the Bike Safety Working Group. As you know, the Bike Safety Working Group is also looking at scooter safety.
Yep.
And so scooter safety has kind of taken front seat for now. We hope to wrap that up early in the new year and get back to bike safety shortly thereafter.
Okay. I do know that there is an update in our packet, Councilmember or Vice Mayor Kuby and I, and Councilmember Adams on the drought resiliency. Some of the next steps is working with our representatives from AMWA and the CAWCD board to discuss potential shortages and impacts to not only the city, but our residential use in the future. So we're asking for a 90-day extension.
Yes.
Okay. All right, with that, Mr. Manager, do you have any announcements?
Just to, I've been assured that this time is for real, but this is in fact Shelley Hearn's last meeting. Not that we're looking forward to her leaving, but again, there's no bad time to once again reiterate how much we appreciate her service to Tempe and how much we wish her well in her retirement. So thank you, Shelley. I also want to quickly announce Mark Day, appointed this week as our new budget director for the office, the municipal budget office. So congratulations to Mark.
Guys,
All right, our next meeting is January 17th for our work study issue review. With that, we're adjourned.